Something was buried beneath Skyrim long before the Nords arrived. Something the Snow Elves did not want anyone to find. And when the College of Winterhold finally dug it up, they had no idea what they were standing next to. Before the first Nord king sat on any throne, Skyrim was already old. The Merethic era was the long age before written history. No empires, no kings, no roads, just cold land, ancient forests, and the elves who lived there first. In the far north, a people called the Snow Elves had built their civilization quietly across the ice. They were not savage. They were not simple. They had cities, they had priests, and they had knowledge that most of Tamriel had not yet discovered. One of those cities sat on a spot the Nords would later call Sarthal. The ancient Nords did not choose Sarthal by accident. It was the first real settlement the Atmorans built after crossing the frozen sea from their homeland. The Atmorans were the ancestors of the Nords, a people from a cold continent far to the north called Atmora. They sailed south and landed in Skyrim, looking for a new home. Sarthal was where they planted their roots. It sat in a wide valley in the Pale, close to rivers and sheltered from the worst of the northern wind. But the Nords did not pick that spot only for shelter. Some fans believe the location was chosen because the ground there felt different, older, like something underneath it was already humming quietly before the first stone was laid. The Nords may not have known what that meant, but they stayed anyway, and they built their first city right on top of it. The cold wind still moves through that valley today. The city is long gone, but the ground there has never fully gone quiet. The Snow Elves attacked Sarthal in an event later called the Night of Tears. Most of the Atmoran settlers died. The city burned. Ysgramor, the great Nordic leader, escaped with only 2 of his sons. He sailed back to Mora, gathered 500 warriors, and returned to take revenge. That story is told in songs and in the halls of Jorrvaskr. But the songs leave something out. They say the Snow Elves attacked out of hatred, out of fear that the Nords were spreading too fast across Skyrim. That is part of the reason. But buried inside the College of Winterhold questline is a quieter truth. The Snow Elves were not just afraid of the Nords, they were afraid of what the Nords had found. Underneath Sarthal, sealed in the dark, was an object of enormous power. The Snow Elves knew it was there. They had known for a long time, and they did not want the Nords anywhere near it. The Night of Tears was not just a raid. It may have been a last attempt to protect something ancient from people who did not understand what they were sitting on top of. That object beneath Sarthal was the Eye of Magnus. It does not look like much when you first see it in the game. It is a large, glowing sphere, quiet, still, floating in a chamber, deep underground. But the Snow Elves understood what it was in a way that most characters in the questline do not. The Eye of Magnus is connected to Magnus, the god of magic, in Elder Scrolls lore. Magnus was the architect of the world. He helped design Mundus, the mortal plane, before leaving for the realm of Aetherius. He left behind a hole in the sky. That hole became the sun. The eye is a piece of that original creation. It holds a level of magical energy that does not belong in the mortal world. The Snow Elves sealed it underground deliberately. They built around it carefully. They kept it hidden for a reason. It was not a treasure. It was a problem they had chosen to quietly contain. When you enter Sarthal during the College of Winterhold questline, your character finds the ruins of the original Nord settlement. The architecture is layered. You can see Snow Elf stonework underneath the Nordic construction. That detail is easy to miss, but it matters. The Snow Elves built in that location first. The Nords built on top of what the Snow Elves had already made. Some of those lower chambers were sealed intentionally. The Snow Elves did not just live near the Eye of Magnus. They designed a structure around it that was meant to keep it contained. The walls, the layout, the depth of the chambers, it was all deliberate. It was not a temple to worship the Eye. It was closer to a vault, a quiet, careful effort to make sure nothing from outside could reach it, and nothing from inside could get out. Centuries of Nordic settlement sat above it, without knowing any of this was underneath. Tolfdir is the college mage who leads the Sarthal excavation at the start of the questline. He is enthusiastic. He talks about the dig like an old professor who has finally found something worth finding. But Tolfdir does not fully understand what he has uncovered. None of the college mages do at first. They find artifacts, they find architecture, they find evidence of a civilization older than anything they expected, but they treat it like a historical site. They are careful but curious. The buried detail here is that the College of Winterhold, one of the most powerful magical institutions in Skyrim, walked into that site completely unprepared for what was waiting for them. No one in the college had any record of the Eye of Magnus being there. The Snow Elves had kept that secret well. Thousands of years had passed, and still almost no one knew. The best-kept secrets in Tamriel are not hidden in vaults or guarded by armies. They are simply left alone long enough that everyone forgets to look. There is a detail in the Sarthal dungeon that most players walk past without stopping. When your character first enters the lower chambers, there is an ancient Nordic puzzle that involves a specific amulet, the Sarthal amulet. You find it on a shelf, put it on, and use it to open a sealed door. That amulet has been sitting in those ruins for thousands of years. It was not placed there randomly. The amulet interacts with the sealing magic built into the chamber walls. Some fans believe the amulet was part of the Snow Elf containment system. The Nords, who eventually settled Sarthal, may have picked it up, not knowing what it was, and incorporated it into their own burial practices. By the time the college mages arrive, the amulet has been sitting in that dungeon so long that it looks like just another piece of old jewelry. It was actually a key, one that still worked perfectly after all that time. The Snow Elves, who attacked Sarthal, were not acting out of pure cruelty. That is the version of history that survived in Nord culture. But Elder Scrolls lore, especially the books and dialogue found across Skyrim, suggests a more complicated picture. The Snow Elves were already under pressure by the time the Etmorans arrived. They were not the only elves in Tamriel. The other Mer cultures looked down on them. Their civilization was smaller and more isolated. The arrival of the Nords in the north put them in a difficult position, and then the Nords settled directly on top of one of the most dangerous objects the Snow Elves had ever encountered. From the Snow Elf perspective, the attack on Sarthal may have felt necessary, not right, not good, but necessary. A desperate move to remove a group of people from a site that the Snow Elves believed had to stay sealed. History remembered them as attackers, but they may have believed they were the last line of protection. After the Night of Tears and Ysgramor's revenge, the Snow Elves never recovered as a civilization. The Nords pushed them back across Skyrim. Many Snow Elves fled underground and made a desperate deal with the Dwemer, the underground elves, who lived in deep caverns and built great machines. The Dwemer agreed to shelter the Snow Elves, but they had conditions. The Snow Elves had to eat a specific fungus that grew in the deep dark. Over generations, that fungus blinded them. Their culture collapsed. Their knowledge faded. They became the Falmer, the blind, hunched creatures found in deep ruins across Skyrim. The Snow Elves, who built carefully around the Eye of Magnus, who understood its danger, who tried to contain it, their descendants, became the Falmer, who mindlessly attack anyone who enters their caverns. The people who once guarded Tamriel's most dangerous secret ended up forgetting they had ever done it. Knight Paladin Gelibor is a Snow Elf who survived without going through that transformation. He is found during the Dawnguard questline, standing in a sunken chapel called Auriel's Chapel near the Forgotten Vale. He has been there for thousands of years, alone, waiting. He still has his mind. He still has his faith. And when you speak to him, he tells you about Snow Elf civilization before the fall, what it looked like, what they believed, how they lived. His dialogue is one of the quietest and most detailed pieces of Snow Elf lore in the entire game. He describes his people not as warriors or attackers, but as scholars and worshippers of Auriel, the elven name for Akatosh, the god of time. The Snow Elves were a deeply spiritual people. Gelebor carries that memory alone. He is the last living record of a civilization that almost no one else remembers. The Eye of Magnus, once discovered, becomes the focus of the entire College of Winterhold questline. The Thalmor, the elven government that controls the Aldmeri Dominion, send an agent named Ancano to the college. His goal is to claim the Eye for the Dominion. Ancano is presented as a political observer, but his real interest is the Eye. When he eventually makes his move and tries to use it, the power he releases nearly destroys Winterhold entirely. The town is already in bad shape. Most of it fell into the sea long ago during an event called the Great Collapse. By the time the main questline happens, Winterhold is barely a village. Ancano's actions nearly finish what the collapse started. The buried detail here is quiet, but worth sitting with. The Snow Elves spent thousands of years carefully containing the Eye because they knew what it could do. One Thalmor agent, acting alone, nearly caused exactly the kind of disaster the Snow Elves had been preventing. Their caution was not fear, it was understanding. At the end of the College of Winterhold questline, the Eye of Magnus is taken away by the Psijic Order, a group of ancient monks who exist slightly outside of normal time. They appear and disappear without explanation. They have been watching the situation quietly. When the crisis is resolved, they simply take the Eye and leave. Where they take it is never explained in the game. What they plan to do with it is never said. The questline ends. The college returns to its routines, and the object that the Snow Elves sealed underground thousands of years ago simply disappears into the hands of monks who exist outside of time. Some fans find that ending unsatisfying, but in another way, it is fitting. The Eye of Magnus was always going to be someone else's problem to contain. The Snow Elves knew that. The Psijic Order knew that. The only people who did not know were the ones who kept accidentally finding it. Some things are not meant to be understood. They are only meant to be kept quiet. Sarthal still sits in the pale, half buried under old snow. The excavation tents are still there. The torches still burn inside. Most people who pass through that part of Skyrim do not stop to think about what is underneath. They see old ruins and keep walking. But the ground there holds more history than most kingdoms. Snow Elf stonework, Nordic graves, a chamber that once held a piece of the original design of the world, all of it layered on top of each other, quiet and still. The Merethic era left no written records, but it left this, and for now, that is enough. Ysgramor's name is in every Nord song, every mead hall knows it, but he did not cross the sea alone. He brought 500 warriors with him when he returned to Skyrim. Most of their names never made it into the songs. The Merethic era was already ending when the Atmorans came back to Skyrim. They came not to settle this time. They came to fight. Ysgramor led them south across the frozen sea, armed and ready. That return became the founding moment of Nordic warrior culture, and the group he led, the 500 companions, became the oldest and most respected warrior tradition in all of Skyrim's history. The companions' questline in the game carries echoes of that original group, but most of those echoes are quiet, easy to miss, worth sitting with slowly. Ysgramor did not pick his 500 warriors at random. The in-game book, called Songs of the Return, describes individual companions by name: Terissa of the Eastern Wind, Jofnir Iceblade, Brunwolf of the Blunt Blade. These are real names written into Skyrim's lore, but none of them appear as characters in the actual game. You cannot meet them. You cannot ask about them. They exist only in the old texts sitting on shelves inside Jorvaska. Most players walk past those books without opening them. The names inside belong to people who shaped the founding of every hold in Skyrim. They cleared the land. They built the first settlements. Then history moved on and left them behind. The books collect dust. The names inside grow quiet. The Skyforge sits on a high rock above Witterun. It looks old, it feels old, and it is, much older than most players realize. Confirmed lore in Skyrim states that the Skyforge predates Witterun itself by a very long time. The city grew up around the forge, not the other way around. The companions settled near it because of what it was. The forge was already there when the first Atmarans arrived in that part of Skyrim. Some scholars in the game believe it is one of the oldest man-made structures in the province. The metal it produces has a quality that regular forges cannot match. The cold wind moves around it differently up on that rock. It stands above the city like something that belongs to a time before cities existed. Whiterun was built in its shadow, and it has been burning, quietly, ever since. Kodlak Whiteman is the harbinger of the companions when the game begins. He is old. He is calm. He speaks about the history of the companions with real weight, but there is a quiet contradiction buried in what he says. Kodlak describes the beast blood, the lycanthropy that the Circle secretly carries, as something that came to the companions through the Glenmoral witches long ago. He treats it like an old mistake, a deal made by people who wanted power and did not think about the cost. But the historical texts about the original 500 companions describe no such curse. The beast blood is not part of the founding story. It came later. Kodlak knows this. He never explains exactly when the deal was made or who made it first. He only says it was long ago. That gap, that quiet space between what he says and what the old texts record, is one of the most interesting silences in the entire questline. Vilkas and Farkas are brothers. They grew up inside Jorvaska. They know the companions better than almost anyone alive in the game. But there are things they do not say directly. When you ask Vilkas about the beast blood, he is careful. He gives you enough to understand the basics. He does not give you everything. Farkas is more open by nature, warmer, less guarded. But even he avoids certain details about how the Circle first received the lycanthropy. Some players believe this is because neither brother fully knows the answer. The records inside Jorvaska are incomplete. The older companions who might have known are gone. What remains is a tradition of silence around the question. The beast blood is carried. The origin is not discussed. Generation after generation of Circle members have accepted the curse without ever being told the full story of where it began. The fire in the mead hall stays warm, but some questions never get asked twice. Wutrad is Ysgramor's legendary axe. In the game you help recover its fragments and restore it during the companion's questline. Most players treat it as a powerful weapon, something to collect and use. But the lore around Wutrad suggests it was always more than that. The fragments were kept scattered deliberately. They were not lost. They were distributed among the companions as sacred relics. Each piece was held by a different member, passed down over generations. The axe was broken after Ysgramor's death, and kept that way as an act of remembrance. Reassembling it was not meant to happen casually. It was meant to happen only when the companions faced something worthy of Ysgramor himself. The questline frames the restoration as a practical step. You need the axe to enter Ysgramor's tomb. But underneath that practical framing is something older. The axe was a symbol of unity. Each fragment was a promise. When the pieces came back together, it meant the companions were whole again, in a way they had not been for a very long time. Jorvaska is the mead hall of the companions in Whiterun. It is one of the oldest buildings in the city, but the building itself has a history that the questline only hints at. The hall was built from an overturned ship, one of the original Atmoran vessels that crossed the frozen sea. The ship was called the Jorvaska. The companions who settled near the Skyforge dragged the hull up the hill, flipped it over, and made it their home. The curved wooden ceiling inside the mead hall is the bottom of that old ship. You can see the shape of it if you look up. Every feast held in that hall takes place inside the hull of a vessel that once carried warriors across the frozen sea in the Merethic era. Most characters inside the hall eat and drink and argue without thinking about what they are sitting in. The ship has been a building for so long that it no longer looks like a ship, but it remembers what it was. There is a character mentioned in Skyrim's in-game texts named Yofnir Iceblade. He was one of the original 500 companions, one of Ysgramor's most trusted warriors during the return to Skyrim. His name appears in the Songs of the Return alongside descriptions of specific battles and holds that different companions helped to clear. Yofnir is credited with actions in the early days of Nordic settlement that shaped the region around what is now Whiterun Hold. He is never mentioned in any quest dialogue. No NPC in the game brings up his name in conversation. He exists only in the book. A player could complete the entire companion's questline, every quest, every conversation, every tomb, and never once hear Yofnir's name spoken aloud. The songs remember Ysgramor, the books remember Yofnir, but the books stay closed on their shelves while the songs play on. The tomb of Ysgramor is found at Yingol Barrow, or rather, Yingol Barrow holds the tomb of Yingol, Ysgramor's son. Ysgramor's actual tomb is at Ysgramor's tomb, a separate location at the far northern coast of Skyrim, near Winterhold. The two sites are often confused by players, but the distinction matters in lore. Ingol was one of Ysgramor's sons who died crossing the sea during a storm. Ysgramor grieved deeply for him. The Song of Ingol describes that grief in quiet detail. A father who led 500 warriors across a frozen sea, but could not protect his own son from the water. Ingol's tomb sits at the shore of a lake. Ysgramor's tomb sits near the sea. Both are cold, both are quiet, and both carry the weight of a family that shaped the entire history of Skyrim. The father's name filled the songs. The son's name filled a barrow by a lake, and the sea between Mora and Skyrim holds neither of them now. The companion's questline ends with a ritual at Ysgramor's tomb. You and the remaining members of the circle gather there to cure Kodlak's soul, to free him from the beast blood, even after his death. The ritual involves hunting down the Glenmoral witches, bringing their heads to the tomb, and burning them in a fire near Kodlak's resting place. It is a specific, deliberate ceremony, and it works. Kodlak's spirit is freed. He passes to Sovngarde, the Nordic afterlife, rather than being claimed by Hassin, the Daedric prince of the hunt. The buried detail in this ending is quiet. Hassin had a claim on Kodlak's soul because of the beast blood deal. The companions essentially contested that claim. They used old magic, old knowledge, and old fire to win an argument with a Daedric prince. And they won. Kodlak's soul moved on. Ysgramor's tomb, which had held the memory of the original 500 for thousands of years, became the place where the companions finally closed an old wound. Long after the Merethic era ended, long after every member of the original 500 had died and been buried, the tradition they started kept moving forward. New companions joined, new harbingers were named. The Mead Hall kept burning through every era of Skyrim's history. The beast blood came and stayed, and was eventually cured. The fragments of Wotrad were scattered, and eventually gathered again. Ysgramor's tomb sat cold and quiet at the northern coast through all of it. The names in the old books stayed on the shelves, and the songs kept singing the one name that everyone remembered, while the other 499 rested in a silence that was, in its own way, just as permanent. The companions are still there in Whiterun. The forge still burns above the city. The old ship still serves as a roof. Some things from the Merethic era did not disappear. They just changed shape slowly, over a very long time, until they looked like something ordinary. But they are not ordinary. They never were. Long before Jarls sat in longhouses and holds had names, Skyrim was governed by priests. They did not call themselves rulers, but they were. The dragon cult controlled the land, the people, and the sky, and for a long time, no one questioned it. The First Era brought many changes to Skyrim, but the dragon cult had already been in power for much longer than that. Their rule stretched back into the Merethic Era, the age before written history. By the time the First Era began, the cult was already ancient. Dragon priests stood at the top of everything. They spoke for the dragons. They collected tribute. They decided who ate and who did not. The rebellion that eventually brought them down was not a quick event. It was slow, quiet at first, then all at once. The labyrinthian questline in the College of Winterhold storyline carries more of this history than most players stop to read. There was a time when dragon priests were not monsters locked in stone coffins. In the early days of the dragon cult, priests were chosen for their intelligence and their loyalty to the dragons. They governed settlements the way a mayor or a lord might. They settled disputes. They managed food stores. They organized labor. The dragons gave them power in return for worship and order. It was a practical arrangement. The priests kept the people calm. The dragons kept the skies clear of threats. Labyrinthian, the great ruined city in Hulmarsh, was one of the places where this system of governance was most visible. It was not just a temple. It was a city, a functioning settlement built around dragon worship and priestly authority. The cold stone halls there once held markets, meeting rooms, and spaces where ordinary people came to bring their concerns to the priests. The ruins show the bones of that old system, if you walk through them slowly enough. Mora is the dragon priest found at the heart of Labyrinthian. He wears a mask, as all dragon priests do. But his mask is different from the others in a quiet way. Morokay's mask is white, almost silver. The other dragon priest masks tend toward darker metals and heavier designs. Morokay's has a lighter, more open look to it. Some fans believe this reflects his role within the cult's hierarchy. He was not a warrior priest. He was a scholar and a keeper of magical knowledge. The College of Winterhold sends you to Labyrinthian, specifically because Morokai holds the Staff of Magnus, a powerful magical artifact. The fact that he was its keeper suggests he was trusted with objects of great importance. A warrior would guard a weapon. A scholar would guard a tool for understanding magic. Morokay kept the staff not as a trophy, but as a responsibility. His mask, light and open, may have been designed to reflect that quieter kind of authority. Word walls are found throughout Skyrim. They teach the dragonborn words of power shouts. That is their most visible function in the game. But the text carved into word walls records more than just shouts. Each wall contains a passage of ancient Nordic language that tells a story. Some passages describe battles. Some describe the dragon the wall was built to honor. Some record the name of the priest who oversaw the wall's construction. The walls were not just teaching tools, they were records. Official documents carved in stone so they would last longer than any book or scroll. In a civilization that governed through the authority of dragons and their priests, having your name or your dragon's name carved into a word wall was a mark of real political standing. The walls were spread across Skyrim, deliberately placed at locations that mattered to the cult's power structure. Each one was a permanent statement, a declaration carved into the rock of the land itself. Nahcrian is one of the dragon priests, but his tomb is not in Skyrim. It is at Skuldafn, the ancient Nordic temple that serves as the gateway to Sovngarde in the main questline. Skuldafn sits high in the Velothi Mountains, on Skyrim's eastern border. You can only reach it by dragon during the main quest. Most players fight through it quickly, focused on getting to the portal to Sovngarde. But Nahcrian's presence there is worth pausing on. Every other named dragon priest is buried somewhere in Skyrim proper, inside a ruin, beneath a mountain, within a city's ancient foundations. Nahcrian alone was placed at the threshold between the mortal world and the Nordic afterlife. Some fans believe this was intentional. Nahcrian may have held a specific role within the dragon cult, related to death rites and the passage of souls. Guarding the entrance to Sovngarde even in death would fit a priest whose authority extended to what happened after life ended. The dragon priest masks in Skyrim are collectible. Most players know this. Bring all 8 together at Labyrinthian, and a 9th mask, Conaric, appears. But the geographic placement of the priests themselves follows a pattern that goes beyond game design. The tombs are spread across Skyrim in a way that mirrors the cult's old territorial structure. Each major region of Skyrim, the Reach, the Rift, the Pale, Hallmark, Harfingar, has at least one dragon priest buried within it. This was not random. In the time of the dragon cult, each priest likely governed a specific territory. Their tomb was placed at the spiritual and political center of that territory. When they died, they stayed where they had ruled. Their power lingered in the land itself. The geography of their burials is a map of the old cult's administrative structure. Skyrim, seen through that lens, looks less like a collection of holds, and more like the ghost of an older kingdom, one ruled not by jarls, but by masked priests, who answered only to dragons. The rebellion against the dragon cult did not begin with armies. It began with whispers. Ordinary Nords who had grown tired of the tribute, tired of the priests, tired of living under a system that treated them as servants of creatures that flew overhead and never came down to walk beside them. The historical texts in Skyrim describe this period as the Dragon War, but that name makes it sound more organized than it probably was at the start. In the early days, the resistance was scattered, small groups in different holds, quietly refusing to pay tribute, quietly hiding food, quietly meeting in places the priests did not watch. The 3 heroes who eventually led the rebellion, Hakon One-Eye, Gormlaith Golden Hilt, and Feldir the Old, did not appear from nowhere. They emerged from that slow, quiet groundswell of resistance that had been building for a long time. The Dragon War was the visible end of something that started much more quietly. Hakon One-Eye is one of the 3 heroes of the ancient Nord rebellion against Alduin and the dragon cult. He appears as a spirit in Sovngarde during the main questline. When you meet him there, he is still a warrior, still ready to fight. His dialogue is short and direct. He does not speak much about the political world he came from, but his name appears in word wall texts across Skyrim, connected to specific battles and specific locations. Hakon was not just a fighter, he was a leader of people in a time when leading people meant standing against an institution that had governed Skyrim for generations. The cult had temples everywhere. It had the loyalty of the dragons. It had centuries of established authority. Hakon One-Eye stood against all of that, with a group of people who had decided enough was enough. His name ended up on word walls, the same kind of walls the cult had built to record its own authority. That is a quiet kind of victory. Gormlaith Golden Hilt is the second of the 3 ancient heroes. Her name is less commonly recognized than Hakon's, but she appears alongside him in Sovngarde. The in-game texts describe her as fearless, someone who fought dragons without hesitation and without the careful strategy that Hakon or Feldir might have preferred. She represents a different face of the rebellion, not the political organizer, not the wise elder, just someone who decided the dragons could be fought and went ahead and fought them. In the context of the dragon cult's rule, that kind of person was the most dangerous thing imaginable. The cult's power rested partly on the belief that dragons were untouchable. Every dragon that fell made that belief harder to maintain. Gormlaith helped crack that belief open. She did not write her name on walls. She put it in the memories of the people who watched her fight. Feldir the Old is the 3rd hero. He is the one who proposed using an Elder Scroll to cast Alduin forward through time, to remove him from the battle at the throat of the world, rather than destroy him outright. That decision is debated even in Sovngarde. Hakon and Gormlaith wanted to end Alduin completely. Feldir argued that they could not. The Elder Scroll was his solution. It worked after a fashion. Alduin was gone. The dragon cult collapsed without its god. The rebellion succeeded, but Feldir's method left a problem for the future to solve. Alduin would return, eventually, and the people of that future age would have to face what Feldir had only delayed. He knew this. He used the scroll anyway. The First Era texts do not record whether he thought he had made the right choice. They only record that he made it, and that the world moved on after he did. The dragon cult left behind more than ruins and masks. It left behind a way of thinking about power that never fully disappeared from Skyrim. The idea that authority comes from something above, from creatures or forces that ordinary people cannot reach or question, shaped Nordic culture in ways that outlasted the cult itself. The Jarls who replaced the priests still looked upward, to the divines, to shore, to the idea that rulership carries a weight that comes from somewhere beyond the person holding it. The priests are gone. The dragons sleep, but the shape of the world the cult built is still visible in how Skyrim organizes itself in its halls, its traditions, its quiet reverence for things older than memory. The First Era moved on. The holds took shape. New leaders rose with new names and new reasons to rule. But the old priest tombs stayed where they were sealed, cold and patient. The masks stayed on. The word walls kept their carvings. And somewhere beneath Labyrinthian, in chambers that had once been full of people and fire and the sound of daily life, the stone settled into a silence that has lasted ever since. The Daedric princes do not live in time. They exist beside it. While kingdoms rise and fall and whole civilizations turn to dust, the princes simply continue. They were here before the first temple was built. They will be here long after the last one collapses. And they have always been interested in mortals, not because they need them, but because mortals do things that immortal beings cannot do on their own. The Daedric questlines in Skyrim are easy to read as simple transactions. A prince wants something done. You do it. You get an artifact. Quest complete. But the logic underneath those quests is quieter and more layered than that surface reading suggests. The princes are not hiring workers. They are running something closer to long experiments. Each quest, each artifact, each mortal chosen for a task, it all fits into a pattern that stretches back further than any single era of Tamriel's history. Sitting with that pattern slowly makes the quests feel different, less like errands, more like invitations into something very old. Several Daedric artifacts in Skyrim were not made to stay with one person. The ebony mail, the mace of Molag Bal, the Wabberjack, each of these has a history of passing between mortal hosts across long stretches of time. The artifacts show up in different eras, held by different people, in different parts of Tamriel. This is not coincidence. Daedric artifacts are extensions of their princes. They carry a piece of the prince's will inside them. When an artifact moves to a new host, the prince gains a new point of contact in the mortal world. Some fans believe the princes do not particularly care who holds the artifact at any given moment. What matters is that it keeps moving. A Daedric artifact sitting in a locked chest serves no one. An artifact passing from hand to hand, shaping choices and outcomes across generations that serves the prince perfectly. The quests that award these artifacts are not endings. They are handoffs. Molag Bal's questline in Skyrim, called The House of Horrors, takes place in an abandoned house in Markarth. A priest of Boethia is trapped inside. Molag Bal wants you to help him reclaim the house and destroy the priest. The reward is the mace of Molag Bal. On the surface, it reads as a straightforward Daedric quest, but the structure of the quest mirrors something specific. Molag Bal is the Daedric prince of domination, of breaking the will of others and claiming their soul. The quest places you in a situation where you must choose between helping a trapped man or serving the prince. If you serve the prince, the trapped man dies. His soul, in lore terms, would be a prize for Molag Bal. The quest is not just a task, it is a demonstration of Molag Bal's core interest, finding out whether a mortal will choose power over mercy. The mace you receive at the end can trap souls. The entire quest was shaped around the same idea as the weapon it rewards. Azura is one of the few Daedric princes that Skyrim presents sympathetically. Her questline involves recovering a star, her artifact, from a corrupted mage who tried to modify it. Azura speaks gently. She seems protective of her followers. She feels, in Skyrim, like a prince who genuinely cares. But players who know their Elder Scrolls history will notice something quietly off about this version of Azura. In Morrowind, the previous game in the series, Azura cursed an entire elven people. The Chimer became the Dwemer, the Dark Elves, because of Azura's anger. She turned their skin grey and their eyes red as punishment. That is not the behavior of a gentle, protective figure. That is the behavior of something very old and very capable of cruelty. The Skyrim version of Azura does not contradict her Morrowind behavior exactly, but it shows a different face. The same prince, a different mask. Mortals in each era tend to see only the face the prince chooses to show them. Mehrunes Dagon's artifact in Skyrim is Mehrunes' razor, a small dagger with a chance to instantly kill anything it strikes. The questline to obtain it involves finding 3 fragments of the razor, which were split apart and given to different keepers after a previous owner caused significant damage with it. The fragments are scattered across Skyrim in the hands of people who inherited them without fully understanding what they were holding. That scattering was deliberate, an attempt by someone to make the razor less dangerous by making it incomplete. But the quest asks you to reunite the fragments. And once you do, Mehrunes Dagon himself takes notice. 2 Dremora appear immediately. The prince is watching. He was always watching. The people who split the razor apart believed that separation would neutralize it. What they did not account for was that the prince's attention does not require the artifact to be whole. The razor was never truly contained. It was just waiting for someone to put it back together. Nocturnal is the Daedric prince of darkness and luck. Her connection to the Thieves' Guild in Skyrim runs through the entire guild questline, not just the Daedric quests associated with her. The Nightingales are a secretive group within the guild who have made a direct pact with Nocturnal. In exchange for her blessing during their lives, they serve her in the Twilight Sepulchre after death, guarding the entrance to her realm forever. The skeleton key is Nocturnal's artifact. It is a lockpick that never breaks. In the questline, a former Nightingale named Mercer Frey stole it from the sepulchre. That theft is treated as the central crime of the guild questline, worse than any robbery Mercer committed against the guild itself. The reason is buried in the lore. The skeleton key was not meant to be used as a tool. It was meant to stay inside the sepulchre. It is a key to Nocturnal's own realm. Removing it weakened something at the foundation of the sepulchre, a lock that, in lore terms, holds something in place that is not meant to move. Mercer did not just steal a powerful lockpick. He pulled something out of a door that was supposed to stay shut. The quest for Boethia in Skyrim, called Boethia's Calling, asks you to lure a follower to a shrine and sacrifice them. It is one of the darker quests in the game, but the structure of what Boethia actually wants is worth looking at carefully. Boethia is the prince of plots, betrayal, and the struggle for dominance. The quest does not end with the sacrifice. After the sacrifice, Boethia speaks through the body of your dead follower and announces a trial, a fight among cultists where only one person will survive. That survivor then becomes Boethia's new champion. The quest is designed as a complete demonstration of Boethia's domain: betrayal, competition, survival by any means. The mortal who wins is not rewarded because they were good or clever. They are rewarded because they were willing to do what the others would not. Boethia does not want a servant. The prince wants proof that a mortal can think the way Boethia thinks. The artifact, the ebony mail, goes to whoever proves that most clearly. Clavicus Vile is the Daedric prince of deals and wishes, specifically the kind of wish that does not turn out the way the wisher intended. His questline in Skyrim involves tracking down a vampiric former worshipper who took Vile's artifact, the Rueful Axe, and ran. Vile wants the axe back, but at the end of the quest, Vile offers you a choice. You can give him the axe and receive a different artifact, the mask of Clavicus Vile, or you can keep the axe. The axe is actually the stronger weapon. The mask is the official Daedric artifact for collection purposes. Most players keep the mask because it is the recognized reward, but the framing of the choice is Vile working as intended. He constructed a situation where the technically better option feels like the lesser reward. A prince who specializes in deals that favor the prince, offering a choice where neither option is quite what the mortal expected, is simply being himself. The quest is not about the axe or the mask. It is a small, quiet demonstration of how Clavicus Vile operates. Meridia is the Daedric prince of life and light, and the one prince in Skyrim who seems most openly opposed to the other Daedra. Her questline involves cleansing her temple of a necromancer who filled it with the undead. Meridia despises undead. She despises anything that keeps a soul trapped in a body after death. That position puts her at direct odds with Molag Bal, with Manimarco, with the entire practice of necromancy. But Meridia is still a Daedric prince. She is not a divine. She is not inherently good in the way the 9 divines are understood to be. Her hatred of undead is real, but it comes from her own domain, her own sense of what life and light are supposed to mean. The Dawnbreaker, her artifact, destroys undead and causes them to explode in light on death. It is a weapon built entirely around one prince's personal disgust with a specific kind of existence. Meridia's questline is not about helping people. It is about a prince reclaiming territory that was disrespected. The mortals who benefit from the undead being cleared out are a secondary outcome. Hermaeus Mora is the Daedric prince of knowledge of secrets, of forbidden information, of things that were meant to stay hidden. His presence in Skyrim is quiet. He has no dedicated Daedric quest in the base game. He only appears briefly, offering to trade knowledge for knowledge. But in the Dragonborn DLC, he becomes a central figure, and his behavior there reveals something about how he operates across all of his interactions. Mora does not want followers. He does not want champions. He wants information that he does not yet have. Every mortal who deals with him is, in some sense, a source, a vessel carrying knowledge that Mora has not catalogued yet. When he has what he wants, his interest in that mortal decreases. He is not cruel about it. He simply moves on. The relationship between Mora and any mortal agent was always more like a transaction at a library than a pact between a prince and a servant. He gets the knowledge. The mortal gets something useful. And Mora's collection grows a little larger, a little quieter, in the dark, at the edge of everything. The princes are still out there. They are always out there. The quest lines end. The artifacts stay in your inventory, but the princes do not notice the ending. For them, the conversation simply pauses. Another mortal will come along eventually. Another task will need doing. Another artifact will need a new hand to carry it forward into the next stage. Time moves differently for something that does not live inside it, and the princes have learned, over more ages than any mortal can count, that patience is the only tool they will ever truly need. The First Era produced many powerful figures across Tamriel. Most of them ruled through armies or bloodlines. Shalidor ruled through ideas. He was an archmage, the most powerful mage of his age in Skyrim, and he spent his entire life arguing with the world about what magic was supposed to be. The First Era was a time when human kingdoms were still finding their shape. The Nords had pushed back the dragon cult. The holds were forming. And in the middle of all that political noise, a mage named Shalidor was doing something quieter. He was building, experimenting, writing, testing theories that most people around him did not fully understand. His name appears more times across Skyrim's in-game books and location lore than almost any other named historical figure. He is everywhere and almost nowhere at the same time. You never meet him. You only find what he left behind. The Shalidor's Insights questline is given by Urag Groshub, the librarian at the College of Winterhold. He sends you to recover lost tomes written by Shalidor. The quest is radiant, meaning the tomes appear in different locations each time you play. But the content of those tomes is consistent. They describe magical theory in Shalidor's own voice. Each tome is a window into how he thought. What comes through clearly is that Shalidor was not interested in magic as a tool for combat or politics. He was interested in magic as a language, a system of rules that governed reality itself. His experiments were not designed to make him stronger. They were designed to test whether his understanding of those rules was correct. Many of his experiments failed. The tomes record those failures honestly. A mage who writes down his failures with the same care as his successes is a mage who is trying to understand something true, not just trying to win. The tomes sat lost in ruins for a long time before the college sent anyone looking for them. That says something about how the world treated Shalidor's ideas while he was alive. Labyrinthian is most commonly associated with the dragon cult and the dragon priest, Mora. But the city's history is layered. Shalidor built Labyrinthian, or rather, he built a significant portion of it during the First Era as a place for magical study and experimentation. The name itself reflects his intent. A labyrinth is a place designed to test the person walking through it. Shalidor did not build Labyrinthian as a home or a fortress. He built it as a testing ground. The architecture was meant to challenge mages to put them in situations where they had to think carefully, apply real magical knowledge, and prove they understood what they were doing before moving forward. The Shalidor's Maze section of Labyrinthian still exists in the game. It requires specific spell schools to navigate. Each gate responds to a different type of magic. That design is not decorative. It is a lesson left in stone. Shalidor built his city the way he wrote his books, as a series of problems, with answers hidden inside them. The dragon cult occupied parts of Labyrinthian too, at different points in history. The two layers of occupation sit on top of each other in the ruins. One layer tests your mind, the other guards the dead. The College of Winterhold is the premier magical institution in Skyrim during the Fourth Era, the time of the main game. Its founding is attributed to the early First Era, though the exact date is not clearly recorded. What is recorded is that Shalidor was involved in establishing the principles the college was built around. His belief that magic should be studied systematically, that mages should be trained rather than self-taught, that knowledge should be preserved rather than hoarded, is the philosophical foundation the college still operates on. The connection between Shalidor's maze at Labyrinthian and the college's founding logic is quiet but present. Both are built around the same idea. You do not simply give a mage power and send them out into the world. You put them through a process. You make them demonstrate understanding before they advance. Shalidor did not just build a testing ground. He built a model for what magical education should look like. The college, centuries later, is still running on that model. One of the more unusual pieces of Shalidor lore involves a wager with Sheogorath, the Daedric Prince of Madness. According to in-game texts, Shalidor wagered with Sheogorath and lost. The price was the island of Ivea, a refuge Shalidor had created for mages, a safe place outside normal Tamriel, where magical study could happen without political interference. Sheogorath claimed Ivea and hid it within his own realm, the Shivering Isles. This story is fleshed out more fully in Elder Scrolls Online, but the fact of the wager and the loss is part of established lore. What it reveals about Shalidor is interesting. A man who spent his life arguing that magic should follow careful, rational rules, made a bet with the Prince of Madness and lost. The mage who believed in systems and logic was outplayed by the one being in existence who operates entirely without them. Ivea was eventually recovered, but the loss stayed in the record. Even the most careful mind in Skyrim had a weakness for a wager. Shalidor is credited in some in-game texts with creating Labyrinthian's protective enchantments, the magical defenses built into the city's structure. These were not simple ward spells. They were layered systems designed to activate in sequence, respond to specific types of intrusion, and scale their response based on the threat. That kind of enchantment work represents a level of magical engineering that most mages of any era would struggle to replicate. The fact that those defenses were still partially active thousands of years later, as the college questline demonstrates, when you navigate the ruins, says something about the quality of the work. Magic does not usually last that long without maintenance. Stone crumbles, metal rusts. But Shalidor's enchantments held through the fall of the dragon cult, through the rise and fall of multiple Nordic kingdoms, through every era of Skyrim's long history. The city fell apart around them. The spells kept running. There is a detail in Skyrim's lore that connects Shalidor to a much larger idea, the concept of the Towers of Tamriel. The towers are massive structures, each one tied to a specific stone or object that anchors reality in its region. Some scholars in Elder Scrolls lore believe the towers hold the mortal world together. Shalidor's writings touch on this idea, though not directly. His argument with the nature of time and his experiments with creating pocket realms suggest he was working toward an understanding of how reality is structured at a fundamental level. Some fans believe Shalidor understood that magic was not just a force, it was part of the same system that the towers maintained. His attempt to create Ivir as a separate refuge may have been a small-scale experiment in the same principle that governs the towers, a place held together by will and magical structure rather than by the natural laws of Mundus. He never completed that theory, but the shape of it is visible in what he built. Shalidor's writings appear across Skyrim in places that seem unconnected at first. His books show up in college libraries, in remote Nordic ruins, in Dwemer excavation sites, in the inventories of traveling merchants. No other named First-Era author has that kind of reach across the game's geography. Part of this is because Shalidor wrote a great deal, but part of it is because his work was considered worth copying and preserving by many different groups over many different centuries. Mages copied his texts for study. Collectors kept them as rare items. Nordic scholars preserved them as historical records. Even people who did not fully understand his theories recognized that the books had value. A writer whose work survives not because of political power or religious authority, but simply because people kept deciding it was worth keeping, is a writer who managed something quiet and lasting. Shalidor argued with the world through his books, and the world kept the argument going long after he was gone. The labyrinthian questline ends when you defeat Mora and retrieve the Staff of Magnus. You walk back out through the ruins, past the dragon cult architecture, past the old market spaces, past the maze gates that respond to spell schools. The city is quiet, cold. The wind moves through the upper chambers the way wind moves through any ruin, but the enchantments are still there, faintly. Shalidor's work is still in the walls. The first era is long over. The College of Winterhold is still running on his ideas. And somewhere in the college library, a book with his name on it sits on a shelf, patient, quiet, still arguing its point to anyone who opens it slowly enough to listen. Shalidor did not rule Skyrim. He did not lead armies or sit on any throne. He built a city, wrote books, made a bad wager, and spent his life trying to understand how everything worked. The first era moved on without him. The holds filled with Jarls. The empires rose. But the mage who argued with the world left more of himself behind than most kings ever managed. His name is still on the walls. His gates still open for the right spell. His ideas are still being taught. That is a different kind of legacy, quieter, slower, and much harder to erase. In the second era, the long Middle Age of Tamriel's history, the Reach was a contested place. Nords fought for it. Imperials passed through it. But long before either of them arrived, the Reach folk were already there. They had always been there. And they built something that most of Skyrim's official history chose not to remember. The Reach is the westernmost hold in Skyrim. It is rocky, cold, and difficult to cross. The Forsworn, the ragged, feathered warriors who attack travelers on the roads, seem like simple bandits at first. Most players treat them that way. But the Forsworn conspiracy questline in Markarth tells a different story. The Reach had a kingdom, a real one, with a king, a political structure, and a people who governed themselves before the Nords arrived and took the land by force. That kingdom was brief but real, and its memory is the engine behind everything the Forsworn do. Madanach is called the King in rags. He sits in Sidna Mine, the prison built inside a Dwemer silver mine, beneath Markarth, serving a life sentence without a trial. When you meet him during the No One Escapes Sidna Mine questline, he is calm, controlled. He has been in that mine for a long time. His dialogue reveals the history of the Reach Kingdom in careful pieces. The Reach folk held Markarth briefly during a period when the Empire's grip on Skyrim weakened. They governed the city. They maintained order. That period was called the Forsworn Uprising, though the Reach folk themselves would not have used that word. To them, they were simply governing their own land. The Nords retook Markarth with significant violence and imprisoned or killed anyone connected to the Reach folk government. Madanach survived because someone decided he was more useful alive. He has been thinking about the Reach every day since. His patience is the patience of someone who believes history is not finished yet. The Haegrivens that work alongside the Forsworn are easy to read as simple monsters. They are twisted, frightening figures with bird features and dark magic. But their role within Reach folk culture is more specific than that. Haegravens are women witches who gave up their humanity in a ritual exchange. They traded their mortal form for greater magical power and a connection to the old nature magic of the Reach. This ritual predates the Second Era. It predates the Forsworn as a political movement. The Hagraven tradition is part of the oldest layer of Reach folk spiritual practice, older than any organized kingdom, older than any conflict with the Nords. In Reach folk culture, Hagravens are not monsters. They are a kind of elder, a form of spiritual authority that communities look to for guidance and magical support. The Forsworn did not invent Haegravens. They inherited them from a religious tradition that had been running quietly in the Reach for a very long time before anyone else arrived to have an opinion about it. The cold stone shrines in the Reach, covered in feathers and old offerings, are not random decoration. They are the visible edge of something much older underneath. Markarth is built on top of a Dwemer city. The Dwemer, the deep elves, who vanished in an instant during the First Era, built extensively in the Reach. The stone foundations of modern Markarth are Dwemer foundations. The pipes, the channels, the basic architecture of the city's lower levels, all Dwemer. When the Reach folk occupied Markarth during their brief period of self-governance, they were living inside a structure built by a civilization that had been gone for centuries. The Reach folk did not build Markarth, they moved into it, and before them, the Nords had done the same. Markarth has never been built from scratch by any of the people who claimed it. It has only ever been occupied, layer after layer, of people living inside a shell that the Dwemer left behind. The Dwemer city, underneath the current city, still exists in parts. The Inchuanzel excavation site beneath the city is a Dwemer ruin that researchers are still trying to map. The city above does not know what is directly beneath its feet. The Silver Blood family controls Markarth. They own Sidna Mine. They have political influence over the Jarl and significant economic power throughout the Reach. Their wealth comes from silver, from the mine that sits beneath the city and produces the metal that funds their position. But there is a quieter dimension to their control of the mine. Sidna Mine is also a prison, and the people imprisoned there are, overwhelmingly, Forsworn. The Silver Bloods use Forsworn labor to extract silver from a Dwemer mine, and because the prisoners are Forsworn, they have every reason to keep the official history of the Reach, the one that acknowledges a legitimate Reach folk kingdom, from becoming widely known. A prison run by a family that benefits from the political status quo. filled with people whose very existence challenges that status quo that is not accidental. Madanach sits in that mine not just as a prisoner, he sits there as a suppressed historical record. His knowledge of what the Reach once was is exactly as inconvenient as his freedom would be. The abandoned forsworn camps and settlements scattered across the Reach are not random. They follow a geographic logic that reflects the old territorial boundaries of Reachfolk communities before the Nordic conquest. The western holds of Skyrim, particularly the Reach, contain more of these abandoned sites than any other part of the province. Each one represents a place where a Reachfolk community once lived, farmed, worshipped, and organized their lives. The forsworn who occupy them now are not squatters. They are returning to places their families once held. The geography of the Reach, read through that lens, becomes a map of displacement. Every abandoned settlement is a dot on that map. Every forsworn camp marks a place where someone decided to go back and stand in the ruins of what used to be theirs. The roads through the Reach cut through that geography without acknowledging it. Travelers see dangerous territory. The forsworn see a homeland. The forsworn conspiracy questline begins with a murder in Markarth's marketplace, in broad daylight, in front of witnesses. And the city guard's response, their immediate attempt to suppress any investigation, is the first sign that something underneath the surface of Markarth is being carefully managed. As you follow the quest line, the suppression becomes clearer. Witnesses are silenced, evidence disappears. The official version of events in Markarth is maintained by active effort, not just by time and forgetfulness. The people doing the maintaining have reasons. The Reachfolk history, the kingdom, the uprising, the violent recapture is not officially discussed in Markarth, because discussing it honestly would require acknowledging that the current order of the city was built on something that not everyone agreed to. The conspiracy in the questline title refers to a forsworn plot, but the deeper conspiracy is the one that has been running quietly in the background of Markarth's politics for a very long time before the questline begins. The end of the No One Escapes Sidna Mine questline offers two paths. You can help Madanach lead a prison break and escape with the forsworn through old Dwemer tunnels beneath the mine, or you can betray Madanach to the Silverbloods and walk out alone. Both endings resolve the immediate situation. Neither one resolves the history. The Reach Kingdom is still unacknowledged. The Reach folk are still displaced. The forsworn are still in the hills. Madanach either escapes into exile or dies in the mine, but the underlying situation, the land dispute that the Second Era's conflicts created and that no subsequent government ever properly addressed, continues past both endings. The questline ends. The Reach does not. It keeps sitting there in the western corner of Skyrim, cold and rocky, and full of people who remember something that the official histories decided was not worth writing down. The Reach folk had a word for themselves. They had a language. They had spiritual practices that connected them to the land in ways that outsiders did not understand, and mostly did not try to. The Hagravens, the old shrines, the briar hearts, these are not affectations. They are the visible remnants of a culture that developed over a very long time in a very specific landscape. The Nords saw the Reach as territory to be held. The Empire saw it as a province to be taxed. The Reach folk saw it as a place that was theirs in a way that predated any of those other claims. That disagreement never got resolved. It just got managed. And management, in Markarth, looked a lot like a prison built inside a mine, run by a family that preferred the old history to stay exactly where Madanach was sitting. The Second Era moved on. Empires shifted. The holds of Skyrim settled into the borders they still hold in the time of the main game. The Reach stayed contested. The Forsworn stayed in the hills. Madanach stayed patient. And the Dwemer stone beneath Markarth kept holding the city up indifferent, as always, to whoever happened to be living inside it this particular century. The Dwemer vanished in an instant. Every single one of them, across every city, every ruin, every excavation site in Tamriel gone at the same moment. They left their fires burning. They left their machines running. They left their doors unlocked. And in Skyrim, those doors are still open. The Dwemer, sometimes called the Deep Elves or Dwarves, though they were neither small nor simple, built extensively across Skyrim and the surrounding regions during the First and Second eras. They were engineers above everything else. Their cities ran on steam and pressure and mechanisms that scholars in the Fourth era still cannot fully explain. When they disappeared during the First era, during a moment connected to a failed experiment with the heart of Lorcan, they left behind the most complete archaeological record of any lost civilization in Tamriel. Complete, but still largely unread. The machines kept running, the traps kept triggering, the automatons kept patrolling, and the ruins sat waiting, patient and indifferent, for whoever arrived next. Alftand is a Dwemer ruin in the western part of Skyrim, partially buried under snow and ice. It serves as the main entrance to Blackreach, the enormous underground cavern that sits beneath multiple Dwemer ruins across Skyrim. Most players enter Alftand during the main questline, moving through it quickly to reach Blackreach and then the Tower of Mzark beyond. But the layout of Alftand rewards slower attention. The upper sections of the ruin show signs of a settlement that was functioning normally right up until the moment the Dwemer vanished. Storage areas still hold supplies, organized in the Dwemer manner. Workstations sit mid-task. The ruin does not look like a place that was evacuated or abandoned gradually. It looks like a place where everyone simply stopped in the middle of what they were doing. Some fans believe Alftand's layout specifically suggests it was not just a research site, but a living community, one with residential areas, communal spaces, and ongoing projects that had nothing to do with whatever experiment caused the disappearance. The Dwemer who lived in Alftand were not all researchers. Most of them were just people, going about ordinary lives in an extraordinary city. Soreen Gerard is a Dawnguard recruit, a scholar who joins the vampire hunters and spends her time studying Dwemer crossbow schematics. Her dialogue and quest involvement in the Dawnguard storyline reveals something specific about how the Dwemer approached weapon design. The crossbow is not a simple weapon. The Dwemer version of it involves precise engineering, specific materials, and an understanding of tension and release that goes beyond what most smiths of any era could replicate. Soreen's excitement about the schematics is the excitement of someone who recognizes real craftsmanship. But what her research implies is quieter than her enthusiasm. The Dwemer did not design the crossbow as a battlefield weapon primarily. They designed it as an engineering problem to solve. The result happened to be effective in combat, but the starting point was the mechanism, the puzzle, of how to store and release force in a controlled, repeatable way. Dwemer weapon design was an extension of their broader engineering philosophy. Everything they built was a solution to a problem they found interesting. The fact that the solutions were also lethal was, in some sense, secondary. The crossbow schematics Soreen collects are thousands of years old. They still work. That is the quiet summary of Dwemer engineering in one detail. The placement of Dwemer ruins across Skyrim follows the province's river systems more closely than its roads or its holds. Ruin after ruin sits near water, near rivers, near underground water sources, near coastlines. This is not coincidence. The Dwemer used water extensively in their engineering. Steam power required water. Cooling systems required water. The elaborate pipe networks visible inside Dwemer ruins, the ones that still hiss and drip thousands of years after the Dwemer left, were connected to water sources that the Dwemer had identified and accessed deliberately. When you look at the geographic placement of major Dwemer sites in Skyrim, Alftand, Mzulft, Raldbethar, and Chuan-Zel, and trace lines between them along the river valleys, the pattern of a deliberate infrastructure network becomes visible. The Dwemer did not build where it was convenient. They built where the water was. Their cities were nodes in a larger system. And the rivers of Skyrim still run through that old system, indifferent to the ruins sitting along their banks. Arniel Gain is a College of Winterhold researcher who sends you on a series of fetch quests called Arniel's Endeavor. He wants soul gems. He wants a specific Dwemer artifact called Keening, a dagger connected to the events of the Dwemer disappearance. He wants you to warm soul gems in a Dwemer convector. The quests feel minor, the rewards are small, but the ending of Arniel's questline is one of the quietest and most unusual moments in the game. Arniel disappears. Not dramatically, he simply fades out of existence while you are standing there watching. He does not die. He does not explode. He just stops being present in the world, and his spirit appears afterward as a permanent summon you can call. What Arniel was trying to do was replicate the Dwemer disappearance, to understand it by recreating it. What he succeeded in doing was something slightly different. He did not go where the Dwemer went. He ended up somewhere else, present as a spirit, but absent as a body. He solved a version of the problem, just not the version he intended to solve. The experiment worked. The result was not what he planned. Arniel would probably recognize that outcome as very Dwemer of him. Kagrumes is a Dwemer ruin on Solstheim, the island to the northeast of Skyrim, that serves as the setting for the Dragonborn DLC. It is a small ruin by Dwemer standards, but what it contains is specific. Kagrumes holds a series of automated trial chambers rooms that activate mechanical enemies in waves when you insert specific resonance gems into a control panel. The gems were scattered across Solstheim, held by various creatures and characters. You collect them, bring them to Kagrumes, and run the trials to earn Dwemer rewards. The structure of Kagrumes, the gem system, the automated trials, the reward at the end, only makes sense if you assume the Dwemer expected someone to come back and use it. A trial chamber with a reward system is not a defensive installation. It is a test designed for a future visitor. The Dwemer built Kagrumes as if they planned to return, or as if they expected someone else, someone they trusted enough to leave a reward for to arrive after them. The gems were never meant to be scattered. Something went wrong before the system could be used as intended. But the chamber kept running, kept waiting, and kept the rewards sealed behind its automated trials for thousands of years just in case. Blackreach is the largest underground space in Skyrim. It sits beneath multiple Dwemer ruins and connects them through a vast cavern filled with glowing plants, Falmer settlements, Dwemer automatons, and if you know where to look and use the right, shout a single dragon named Volthuriol, sleeping near the great brass orb at the center of the cavern. Most players pass through Blackreach during the main quest and do not return. But Blackreach is not just a transit route. It is a Dwemer space that was actively maintained and used. The Falmer living there now are descendants of the Snow Elves, who made a deal with the Dwemer centuries ago. The Dwemer used them as labor. When the Dwemer vanished, the Falmer remained blind, degraded, but still present in the space the Dwemer had built. Blackreach, in that sense, is a city that lost its builders but kept its servants. The automatons still patrol. The Falmer still move through the corridors. The great orb still glows. Everything keeps running. It is just running without the people who built it. In a space that was never designed to be entered by anyone the Dwemer did not specifically invite. Mzulft is a Dwemer ruin in Eastmarch. It appears in the College of Winterhold questline as the location of an orrery, a large mechanical device that maps the flow of magical energy across Tamriel. The college sends you there to use the orrery to locate the Eye of Magnus. The device still works. You have to gather focusing crystals scattered around the ruin and align them correctly to get a reading. The fact that a Dwemer astronomical and magical instrument built thousands of years ago still functions well enough to map current magical energy flows is notable. It means the Dwemer understanding of magicka, of how magical energy moves through the world, was accurate enough that their measurements are still valid. The orrery was not just a tool for the Dwemer. It was built to measure something that does not change. The flow of magicka through Tamriel was the same in the Dwemer era as it is in the Fourth era. The machine that reads it still works, because the thing it reads never stopped being true. The Dwemer left behind more functional technology per square foot than any other civilization in Tamriel's history. Their fires still burn in the deeper ruins. Their steam still moves through pipes that have not been maintained in thousands of years. Their automatons still patrol corridors that their creators never returned to. Every Dwemer ruin in Skyrim is a building that outlived its builders by an enormous margin and is still, in the most basic mechanical sense, working. That is either a mark of very good engineering or a sign that the Dwemer built for a future they expected to be part of. Maybe both. The ruins do not answer that question. They just keep running, quietly, in the dark beneath Skyrim's surface, waiting for a next step that never came. There is no era for this. No kingdom, no war. Soul mechanics exist outside the rise and fall of empires, older than any throne, quieter than any battle. A soul is captured the same way in the first era as in the fourth. The gem does not care which century it sits in. It only cares that something is inside it. Soul gems are one of the most common items in Skyrim. You find them in caves, on shelves, in the pockets of dead mages. You use them to enchant weapons and armor. Most players treat them like batteries, something to fill and spend. But the lore sitting quietly underneath soul gem mechanics is one of the more unsettling layers in the entire game. What is actually inside a filled soul gem is not energy in any simple sense. It is something that used to be alive, something that, in several cases, still remembers being alive. The Black Star questline asks you to choose between two outcomes. You can return Azura's Star, a reusable soul gem to its original form, cleansed and restored for Azura, or you can follow the path of a corrupted mage named Malin Varen and keep the star as a black soul gem, one capable of holding human souls rather than animal ones. Most players make the choice based on which reward they want, but the lore difference between the two versions goes deeper than function. Regular soul gems hold the souls of creatures, animals, monsters, lesser beings. Black soul gems hold human souls. In Elder Scrolls lore, human souls are called white souls. They are categorized differently. They are, according to multiple in-game sources, more conscious, more complete. A creature soul trapped in a gem is energy. A human soul trapped in a gem is a person reduced, contained, but still present in some form. The Black Star, in its corrupted form, holds that kind of soul. The questline does not dwell on this. It presents the choice quietly. But the implication sits there for anyone willing to sit with it. Thalion is the mage who lives in Morthal. He is quiet, slightly guarded, and the only person in Skyrim who can cure vampirism through a ritual. That ritual involves a filled black soul gem. You bring him one, meet him at a summoning circle at dawn, and he performs the cure. The mechanics of why this works are not fully explained in the quest dialogue, but the lore points towards something specific. Vampirism in Elder Scrolls lore is connected to Molag Bal, the Daedric prince of domination and soul trapping. Becoming a vampire involves Molag Bal's influence on the soul. The soul of a vampire is, in a sense, partially claimed. Thalion's ritual uses a filled black soul gem, a container holding a human soul, as a kind of trade or anchor. Some fans believe the ritual works by offering the trapped soul as a substitute, a soul to replace the claim Molag Bal has on the vampire's own. Thalion does not explain this. He simply says he needs the gem and knows what he is doing. The soul inside the gem that you bring him disappears after the ritual. Where it goes is never addressed. The cure works. The cost is someone else's soul. Thalion meets you at dawn, does the work quietly, and walks back to Morthal without discussing any of that. The soul cairn is a plane of Oblivion, a realm outside the mortal world that appears in the Dawnguard DLC. It is the realm where souls go when they are trapped in black soul gems and then used. Spent soul gems do not simply release their contents into nothing. The souls inside them are drawn to the soul cairn, and in the soul cairn, those souls are still present, still conscious, still themselves. The spirits you encounter there remember who they were. They speak about their lives. They express feelings. They are not content. They wander a grey, cold, featureless landscape, and they know they are trapped. The soul cairn is controlled by beings called the ideal masters entities, who traded their mortal forms for power long ago and now exist as crystalline structures that feed on the souls of others. The souls in the soul cairn are not resting. They are not at peace. They are resources being slowly consumed by something that has been feeding on them for a very long time. Every soul gem you fill and spend sends someone to that place. The game never interrupts gameplay to tell you this. It just builds the soul cairn carefully and lets you walk through it and notice filled soul gems in Skyrim glow. This is a visual detail that most players register without thinking about. An empty soul gem is dark, just a faceted stone. A filled one emits light from inside. The size of the glow changes based on the soul inside. A petty soul gem with a small creature soul glows faintly. A grand soul gem with a large creature soul glows brightly. A black soul gem with a human soul inside has a specific, cold, contained glow that is different from the others. This is not explained by any quest or any character in the game. No merchant tells you why gems glow. No mage's notes describe the visual difference. It is simply there, a quiet piece of world building that the game trusts you to notice or not notice. The glow is the soul. The brighter the light, the larger the consciousness that was reduced to fit inside the stone. A grand soul gem sitting on an enchanting table, glowing steadily in the dark, is a very large creature that used to be alive. The light does not know that, but the lore does. The College of Winterhold contains research notes scattered across its various rooms and side areas. Among these notes are records of early attempts by college mages to reverse the soul-trapping process, to take a soul out of a gem and return it to a living body, or release it properly into Aetherius, the realm of the dead. These experiments are recorded as failures. The researchers could not find a stable method. Releasing a soul from a gem without a body to return it to simply disperse the soul into nothing, which, in lore terms, may be worse than containment. The soul would not reach Aetherius. It would simply stop existing as a coherent thing. The attempts to do something ethical with trapped souls kept running into the same problem. There was no clean solution. The college's research notes record this frustration honestly. Smart people with good intentions who could not find a way out of the problem. The notes sit on shelves in the college. Most players pick them up, check their value, and put them back down. The problem they describe is still unsolved. Enchanting in Skyrim uses soul gems as fuel. You place a filled gem into the enchanting process, and the soul inside powers the enchantment. The enchantment lasts indefinitely on the item, but the soul gem is spent cracked, empty, dark. In pure mechanical terms, this is straightforward. But the lore framing of it is something else. The soul inside the gem is not fuel in the way wood is fuel for fire. It is not converted into energy and released. According to the lore pathway suggested by the soul cairn and the ideal masters, a spent soul gem sends its contents to the soul cairn. The enchantment on your sword or your armor was powered by a transaction. The ideal masters received a soul. You received a permanent magical effect on a piece of equipment. Every enchanted item in Skyrim is the product of that transaction. The weapons hanging on the wall of Breezehome, the armor sitting in your chest, each piece with an enchantment on it represents something that used to be alive, passing through a process it did not choose, ending up as a permanent feature of someone's equipment. The game does not remind you of this while you enchant. It just lets the table glow and the process complete quietly. Malinvaran is the mage whose corruption drives the Black Star questline. He was a college scholar who became obsessed with soul mechanics, and specifically with the idea of trapping his own soul inside Azura's star to escape death. He succeeded partially. His soul is inside the star when you enter it during the questline. You fight him there, in a strange interior space that exists within the gem itself. What the questline quietly confirms through this is that the interior of a soul gem is not simply empty space containing inert energy. It is a place, a contained space, with its own interior geography. Malin built something inside the star, a refuge, a fortress, a place to exist permanently. It did not work exactly as he planned. He is trapped and deteriorating rather than preserved and comfortable. But the fact that he could build anything inside the star at all confirms that the space within a soul gem has more dimension to it than the outside suggests. The soul gems sitting in your inventory are not just glowing stones. Each filled one contains an interior, a space, something that used to occupy a body, now occupying a different kind of room entirely. Serana is a vampire, a daughter of Cold Harbor, who travels with you through much of the Dawnguard questline. At one point, to enter the soul cairn, you must either become partially soul-trapped yourself, or allow Serana to partially soul-trap you as a workaround. The mechanics of this are unusual. A living person with a full soul cannot simply enter the soul cairn. The ideal masters will not allow it. A person with a partially trapped soul can pass through. Serana offers the partial soul trap as a practical solution. She is matter-of-fact about it. She has lived with vampire soul mechanics long enough that the idea of partially trapping someone's soul reads to her as a tool rather than a violation. Her casualness about it is one of the quieter character details in the questline. She is not cruel. She is simply someone who has lived long enough with the mechanics of soul manipulation that they no longer feel heavy to her. The player character, freshly introduced to the concept, has no such distance. The choice to accept the partial soul trap is one of the few moments in Skyrim where the game asks you to interact with soul mechanics personally rather than through a gem. The soul mechanics of Skyrim sit underneath nearly every system in the game: enchanting, magic, vampirism, the afterlife, the Daedric realms. Most of it is never explained in a single place. It is distributed across questlines, research notes, NPC dialogue, and the quiet visual design of filled gems sitting on shelves. The world is built so that someone who pays attention across many hours of play can assemble the full picture slowly. Each piece fits with the others. The soul cairn connects to the ideal masters, connects to enchanting, connects to the Black Star, connects to Falion's ritual, connects to the glowing gems on the table. It is one system, running quietly beneath everything else. Time does not change it. Eras do not interrupt it. The gem traps. The soul goes somewhere, and somewhere, in a grey and featureless realm at the edge of everything, something that used to be alive is still, in its own diminished way, present. In the Second Era, the long Middle Age of Tamriel, an empire rose along the spine of the continent. The Riemann Empire controlled much of Tamriel for centuries, and the order that served it, the Blades, were not Tamrielic at all. They came from across the sea. They came as conquerors and became protectors, and by the time Skyrim begins, they have mostly forgotten what they originally were. The Blades appear in Skyrim as two people. Delphine runs a small inn in Riverwood. Esbern hides in the ratways beneath Riften. They are the last survivors of an order that once had hundreds of members, an order that served emperors, protected the Dragonblood line, and maintained some of the oldest institutional knowledge in Tamriel. The Thalmor, the elven government of the Aldmeri Dominion, hunted the Blades nearly to extinction after the Great War ended with the White Gold Concordat. By the time you find Delphine and Esbern, the Blades, as an institution, are functionally gone. What remains is two old people who remember things that almost no one else does. Skyhaven Temple is hidden in the Reach, built into the side of a cliff face and sealed behind a blood-activated door. It is an Akaviri structure built by people who came from Akavir, the continent to the east of Tamriel. The Akaviri, who eventually became the Blades, arrived during the Second Era, initially as invaders. The Reman emperors turned them into servants, and guards their skill with blades and their discipline, making them ideal protectors. Skyhaven Temple was built during that period as a blade sanctuary. The architecture inside reflects Akaviri design, curved lines, specific geometric patterns, a visual language that appears nowhere else in Skyrim. The symbols carved into the temple walls are not Nordic. They are not imperial. They belong to a tradition that crossed an ocean and then became something new in service of a different culture. Walking through Skyhaven Temple is walking through the physical memory of a people who gave up their original identity to become something Tamriel needed. Alduin's Wall is the centerpiece of Skyhaven Temple. It is a massive carved relief, a stone mural that covers an entire wall of the temple's main chamber. Esbern explains it during the questline. The wall depicts the history of dragon interactions with mortals, the Dragonborn prophecy, and the method for defeating Alduin. Esbern is excited. He has spent years searching for this. But there is a quiet problem with what the wall shows. Some of the events depicted on Alduin's wall appear to postdate its supposed construction. Scenes that seem to represent the Oblivion crisis, an event from the Third Era, appear on a wall built in the Second Era. This is a genuine lore puzzle that the game does not explain. Some fans believe the Blades who built the wall had prophetic knowledge and carved future events deliberately. Others believe the wall is older than Esbern thinks, or that its construction date is recorded incorrectly in surviving texts. The wall does not explain itself. It sits in the temple and lets scholars argue about it. Esbern's certainty about what he is reading may be slightly more confident than the evidence fully supports. Delphine's dialogue across the Blade's questline is worth sitting with slowly. She is practical, guarded, and focused entirely on the immediate problem of Alduin and the dragons. But scattered through her conversations are quiet admissions about how much the Blades lost. She knows the Order's history. She knows what it was supposed to be. And she is clearly aware that what she and Esbern represent is not a functioning Blades. It is a memory of one. She talks about rebuilding, about recruiting, about restoring the old ways. But the institutional knowledge required to actually run the Blades, the training methods, the internal protocols, the network of contacts, the understanding of their original Akaviri traditions is mostly gone. Delphine is working from fragments. She knows the goal. She has lost the manual for how to get there. Her confidence and her practical focus are real. But underneath them is an organization trying to remember what it was supposed to do by reading its own ruins. The Blade's original oath of service was not sworn to the Emperor in the way most people in Skyrim's time would assume. It was sworn to the Dragonblood, to the specific lineage of rulers who carried Dragonblood in their veins. The Reman Emperors were Dragonborn. The Septim Emperors were Dragonborn. The Blades served the Dragonblood line, and the Emperor happened to be the person currently carrying that blood. This distinction matters when Martin Septim, the last of the Septim line, dies at the end of the Oblivion crisis. The Blades lost their Dragonblood. The Empire continued under a new dynasty, but the new Emperors were not Dragonborn. Technically, the Blades' original oath no longer had a clear recipient. The Order continued out of institutional momentum and tradition, but the specific vow they had made to the blood, not the throne, was left hanging in the air after Martin's death. When you appear in Skyrim as a Dragonborn, the Blade's eagerness to serve you is not just practical, it is the fulfillment of an oath that has been waiting for a valid recipient for over 200 years. Esbern is an archivist. That was his role within the Blades before the Purge. He preserved records, studied prophecy, maintained the institutional memory of the Order. His obsession with Alduin's wall makes complete sense for a man whose entire purpose was to remember what others forgot. But Esbern's knowledge, thorough as it is, has gaps. He can read the wall. He can explain the prophecy. He can tell you about the Akaviri origins of the temple. What he cannot fully account for is everything that was lost during the purge, the records that were destroyed, the members who died without passing on what they knew, the generations of institutional knowledge that simply stopped existing when the Thalmor moved through the Blade's sanctuaries. Espen knows a great deal. He also knows exactly how much he does not know. His careful, slightly anxious manner of speaking reflects a man who has spent decades aware that he is one of the last containers of something that should have been distributed across hundreds of people. The blood seal on the entrance to Skyhaven Temple requires dragonborn blood specifically. When you press your hand to the carved relief at the entrance, the door opens. The seal was designed to ensure that only a dragonborn could enter the temple. This is a piece of Blade's engineering that reflects their original purpose precisely. The temple was built for the dragon blood. The door opens only for the dragon blood. No one else can enter, not through force, not through magic, not through any means the game provides. For however long Skyhaven Temple sat hidden in the Reach, through the fall of the Riemann Empire, through the entire Septim era, through the Oblivion crisis, through 2 centuries of no dragonborn, the door simply stayed shut. Delphine and Esben could not have entered it without you. The temple waited. The blood seal held. And when you arrive and press your hand to the carving, the mechanism that some Akaviri engineer built over 1,000 years ago works exactly as intended. The Akaviri who became the Blades brought something with them from their homeland beyond their combat skills. They brought a specific approach to loyalty, one that was absolute, personal, and non-transferable. The Akaviri tradition the Blades descended from did not produce soldiers who served institutions. It produced individuals who attached their loyalty to a specific person or bloodline and maintained that attachment regardless of political circumstance. This is why the Blades, as an institution, felt the loss of Martin Septim so deeply, not just politically, but personally. The oath was to him and his blood. When that blood ended, the personal dimension of the loyalty had no anchor. The Blades continued as a habit after the Oblivion crisis. The specific Akaviri form of loyalty that originally defined them was waiting, unattached, for something worthy of it. Delphine's immediate recognition of you as someone worth serving, even before she is certain you are dragonborn, reflects that old instinct working through whatever remains of the Akaviri tradition in her training. The name Blades is actually a translation. The Akaviri term for the Order Dragon Guard came first. They were originally dragon hunters. They crossed the sea hunting dragonborn, believing them to be dangerous. Remen Cyrodiil defeated them and converted them to his service. The order that had come to hunt dragonborn became the order that protected them. The name shifted, the purpose inverted, and over the centuries, the history of that original purpose faded from common knowledge. By the 4th era, most people, including most Blades members before the Purge, knew the Blades as Imperial Guards with a long history. The dragon hunting origin had become a footnote. When the dragons return in Skyrim, the Blades circle back to something much older than their service to the Riemann or Septim empires. They circle back to what they originally were, people who knew how to fight dragons, who had crossed an ocean to find dragonborn, and who had built their entire identity around that original purpose. The wheel turned slowly, but it turned all the way around. Skyhaven Temple is still there in the Reach. The carved symbols on the walls still hold their original shapes. Alduin's wall still shows its scenes in silence. The blood seal still works. The Akaviri who built it are long gone, their empire dissolved, their homeland across the sea unreachable. But the temple holds the shape of what they believed in, an order that served the blood, a door that opened only for the right hand, a wall that recorded what they thought the future would ask of whoever came next. The Second Era ended. The empires changed. The The blades forgot pieces of themselves with each generation, and the temple kept its doors shut and waited, patient as stone, for the blood that would eventually arrive to open them. The Third Era lasted nearly 400 years. The Septim Empire held Tamriel together through bloodline, through the blades, through trade and law, and the quiet authority of a throne that most people believed was divinely chosen. And then it ended. The last Septim died. The empire continued without them, smaller, less certain, held together by habit more than faith. In Skyrim, the traces of that long Septim age are everywhere. Most of them are buried inside quest lines that do not announce themselves as history. The Third Era, roughly corresponding to the reign of the Septim dynasty, shaped the institutions that Skyrim still runs on in the time of the main game. The Thieves' Guild, the Dark Brotherhood, the East Empire Company, the Imperial Legion, all of them carry the marks of that era, not on their surfaces, on their foundations, in the assumptions they make about how power works and who it belongs to. Understanding what the Septim Empire actually was helps explain why each of these institutions behaves the way it does when you interact with them in the Fourth Era. The Thieves' Guild's connection to Nocturnal, the Nightingale Oath, the Twilight Sepulchre, the Pact of Service after death predates the Septim Empire by a significant margin. The guild itself changes in structure and membership across eras. But the Nightingale Covenant is older than any specific political arrangement. It runs underneath the guild's history, the way a river runs under a city present in the foundation, invisible on the street level. The guild, as it exists in Skyrim's Fourth Era, has forgotten most of this. Mercer Frey, the guild's leader when the questline begins, knew about the Nightingale Covenant and chose to exploit it rather than honor it. The rank-and-file guild members have no idea the Covenant exists. They think they work for a criminal organization with a headquarters under a graveyard. They do not know they are working inside a structure that has a centuries-old pact with a Daedric prince embedded in its foundations. The Septim Empire rose and fell above that pact without ever touching it. Nocturnal was patient. She always is. The Dark Brotherhood structure in Skyrim is already broken when you find it. Astrid has reorganized the Falkreath Sanctuary around her own authority rather than the traditional Brotherhood hierarchy. In the traditional structure, the Brotherhood answers to the Night Mother, the physical vessel through which Sithis, the Dread Father, communicates. The listener, the person chosen by the Night Mother, holds the highest authority. Astrid eliminated this chain. She runs the sanctuary as a practical business. Contracts come in. Contracts get fulfilled. The theological dimension of the Brotherhood, the covenant with Sithis, the Night Mother's authority, the listener's role has been quietly set aside. This was a change that happened in the aftermath of the Oblivion crisis. The Brotherhood sanctuaries across Tamriel were largely destroyed during that period. Astrid's Falkreath sanctuary survived partly because it was small and isolated. She rebuilt it around what worked: practical contract killing, and let the theological structure lapse. By the time the questline begins, she has convinced herself and her sanctuary members that the old ways were just tradition. The Night Mother, sitting in her coffin in the corner of the sanctuary, has a different opinion, and eventually she makes it known. Astrid's reinterpretation of the Brotherhood is not simply personal ambition. It reflects something broader about how the Oblivion crisis changed institutions across Tamriel. The crisis ended the Septim line and shook the foundations of everything the Septims had built. Organizations that had operated under Septim authority or alongside it had to decide what they were without that context. The Dark Brotherhood had always existed in a complicated relationship with Imperial authority. The Septims used the Brotherhood, tolerated it, occasionally employed it. After the crisis, that relationship dissolved with everything else. Astrid's Brotherhood is an organization that has adapted to operating in a post-Septim world by stripping itself down to its most functional elements. No theology, no hierarchy, just work. It is a very practical response to the collapse of everything that used to give the Brotherhood's more ceremonial elements meaning. It is also, according to the Night Mother, completely wrong. Maven Blackbriar is one of the most quietly powerful people in Skyrim. She runs a meadery. She controls the Thieves Guild through financial influence. She has political relationships with both the Imperial Legion and the Stormcloaks simultaneously. Regardless of which side wins the civil war, Maven ends up as Jarl of Riften in the Imperial ending, appointed by the Empire she supported. In the Stormcloak ending, she maintains her guild connections and her economic power. She is not loyal to either side. She is loyal to her own position. This kind of political flexibility, maintaining influence across opposing factions simultaneously, was a survival skill developed during the Septim era, when imperial authority was the dominant force and local power required careful navigation of that authority. Maven learned to operate in the space between official power and unofficial power during a period when both existed in tension. The Civil War simply replaced one tension with another. Maven adapted without difficulty. The Septim Empire taught Skyrim's power brokers how to survive changing political weather. Maven absorbed that lesson thoroughly. The East Empire Company's Solitude operation is failing when you arrive in Skyrim. The warehouse is understaffed. The shipments are disrupted. The management is struggling. The company itself, a trade organization that operated under Imperial Charter and controlled significant portions of Tamriel's commerce during the Septim era, is contracting. Its presence in Skyrim was once substantial. By the Fourth Era, it has reduced to a single warehouse in Solitude and a small operation on Solstheim. The Civil War disrupted the shipping lanes. The general political instability made long-term trade commitments difficult. But the deeper cause is the one the questline does not name directly. The East Empire Company was a Septim-era institution. It operated under Septim authority, used Septim political connections, and built its network in a Tamriel that the Septims organized. The Septims are gone. The network they built the company inside has been reorganizing itself for 200 years. What you see in Skyrim is the tail end of a very long contraction, a Septim institution slowly going quiet in a post-Septim world. The Imperial Legion soldiers stationed in Skyrim are disciplined, organized, and operating according to protocols developed during the Septim era. Their equipment is standardized. Their chain of command is clear. They represent the most visible surviving piece of Septim institutional culture in the province. But the Civil War questline reveals a quiet tension inside the Legion's Skyrim operation. General Tullius is a skilled soldier and administrator. He is also, fundamentally, someone trying to apply Septim-era military solutions to a post-Septim political problem. The Civil War is not just a military conflict. It is a question about what Skyrim is and who it belongs to. A question the Septim Empire never fully answered, only managed. Tullius understands how to win battles. He is less comfortable with the fact that winning battles may not resolve the underlying question. The legion he commands carries the shape of the Septim era in its bones. The world it is operating in has moved past that era in ways the legion's protocols did not fully anticipate. The companions covered in an earlier chapter are outside this political layer, but the guilds and the legion share something. They are all Fourth-era organizations running on Third-era assumptions. The Thieves Guild assumes a certain relationship between criminal enterprise and Daedric oversight that its current members do not understand. The Dark Brotherhood assumes a theological structure that its current leadership has discarded. The East Empire Company assumes a political network that no longer fully exists. The Legion assumes a political authority that is actively being contested. Each institution is a kind of ghost, still moving, still functional, still present in the world, but carrying the shape of something that the era it was built for has already finished being. The Septim Empire ended. The institutions it shaped are still running. They are just running slightly out of time. The Third Era left Skyrim full of these quiet anachronisms. Buildings built under Septim charters, roads maintained by Septim-era protocols, tax structures inherited from Septim governors, guild arrangements negotiated during Septim reigns. The surface of Skyrim looks like a Fourth-Era world. The Civil War, the Dragon Crisis, the Thalmor's presence, the post-Oblivion political landscape. But the infrastructure underneath it was built by people who believed the Septim Empire would last forever. It did not. And now everything it built is being slowly repurposed, slowly forgotten, or slowly maintained by people who no longer fully remember why it was built the way it was. The Empire left behind more than ruins. It left behind habits, and habits, in Tamriel, outlast almost everything else. The Oblivion crisis ended in the Third Era with a single act. Martin Septim shattered the Amulet of Kings, merged with the Avatar of Akatosh, and destroyed Mehrunes Dagon's physical form. The gates closed, the invasion stopped, and Tamriel was left to count what it had lost. In Skyrim, that counting never fully happened. The scars are still there. Most people just stopped looking at them. The Oblivion crisis was not a distant war for Skyrim. Gates opened across the province the same way they opened across all of Tamriel. Settlements burned. Hold guards fought creatures they had no training to face. Ordinary people hid or fled or died in places that had been safe for generations. By the time the crisis ended, Skyrim had been physically marked by it: scorched earth, collapsed structures, locations where the boundary between Mundus and Oblivion had been stressed hard enough to leave something behind. The Fourth Era moved on top of those marks without removing them. The landscape of Skyrim carries the crisis in its geography, if you know what you are looking at. Several locations in Skyrim sit on or near ground that shows signs of Oblivion Gate activity from the crisis period. The scorched, slightly discolored earth that appears near certain ruins is not always ancient. Some of it dates to the crisis. The gates that opened during that period left physical marks, not just burned ground, but subtle changes in the soil and stone that mages have noted in various research texts found across the game. What makes this detail quietly interesting is that some of these marked locations correspond to quest-relevant ruins that characters in those quests never directly explain. You arrive at a site for one reason: the visual evidence of something older, something that happened 200 years before the main game is sitting in the ground around you. No one mentions it. The quest proceeds. The scar stays where it is, patient and unacknowledged, while the current storyline moves past it without looking down. The ghost of Hjalti Earlybeard haunts the old Herolden Inn. He mistakes you for someone he once knew, a soldier named Hjalti, who is confirmed in lore to be the young Tiber Septim before he took that name. The ghost wants his sword returned. He is stuck in a moment, from long before the Oblivion crisis from the Second Era, when the Reman Empire was ending and a new order was being built. But speaking with the innkeeper about the ghost produces something quietly useful. She describes how the inn has seen soldiers pass through it in every era of Skyrim's history. She mentions the crisis, specifically how soldiers stationed in the Reach used Old Herolden as a waypoint during the gate openings in the Western Holds. The ghost of a Second-Era soldier haunts a building that was a Third-Era military waypoint during the crisis. The building holds multiple layers of history. The ghost represents only one of them. The innkeeper, without fully realizing it, describes how a single location absorbs the weight of every era that passes through it. Mehrunes Dagon's cult in Skyrim, the Mythic Dawn's successor organizations, and the cult that runs the Mehrunes Razor questline survived the crisis in a way that Dagon's other operations across Tamriel did not. The Mythic Dawn, the primary cult responsible for coordinating the crisis, was largely destroyed in the aftermath. Its leadership was killed. Its sanctuaries were raided, its membership scattered, but smaller, localized Dagon worship continued in isolated pockets. In Skyrim specifically, the family that holds the fragments of Mehrunes' Razor the Dagon cult connected to that questline represents one of those surviving pockets. They held onto the fragments across generations. They maintained their belief quietly, without the organizational structure of the mythic dawn, without any real connection to the broader cult network. They simply kept the pieces and waited. The crisis destroyed Dagon's organized presence in Tamriel. It did not destroy the idea of Dagon in the minds of people who had already committed to it. The Razor questline is the quiet echo of something that was supposed to have been finished 200 years earlier. Helgen sits in the southern part of Skyrim, near the Geralt Mountains that form the border with Cyrodiil. Most players know it as the place where the game begins, the execution site that Alduin destroys during the opening sequence. But Helgen's geographic position gave it specific military importance during the Oblivion crisis. The Geralt Mountains are one of the main crossing points between Skyrim and Cyrodiil. During the crisis, Imperial forces moving north and Skyrim forces moving south used the mountain passes near Helgen as transit routes. Helgen itself was a staging and supply point, a place where soldiers rested, equipment was distributed, and coordination between Imperial and Nordic forces happened. The town that Alduin destroys at the start of the game is built on the foundations of that military history. Its position near the pass is not accidental. Settlements near strategic mountain crossings tend to persist because the strategic value of the location does not change, even when the specific conflict does. Helgen survived the crisis. It did not survive a dragon. The Penitus Oculatus are the Imperial intelligence and security organization that replaced the Blades after the Great War, and the White Gold Concordat forced the Blades to disband. Their only visible outpost in Skyrim is in Dragonbridge, a small garrison with a handful of agents. The Dark Brotherhood questline brings you into contact with them when you are tasked with assassinating the Emperor, but their presence in Dragonbridge specifically is worth sitting with separately from that questline. Dragonbridge sits at the main western road crossing into Skyrim. It is the primary land route from Cyrodiil and High Rock into the province. An Imperial intelligence outpost at that location is not incidental. It is a post-crisis security decision. After the gates closed and the damage was assessed, the Empire restructured its approach to provincial security. The Penitus Oculatus model, small, skilled, information-focused, replaced the Blades' model of personal protection and prophetic guidance. Dragonbridge is where that restructured Imperial security presence chose to watch Skyrim from. They monitor who enters the province. They track threats. They operate quietly at the edge of a road that everyone uses without thinking about who is watching from the garrison beside it. The College of Winterhold questline touches on the Oblivion crisis indirectly through a specific detail about Winterhold itself. The city's collapse into the sea, the Great Collapse, happened about 80 years after the crisis ended. The official explanation in the game is that the college's magical activity caused the collapse. Most Winterhold residents believe this, but some scholars within the college have documented an alternative theory that the crisis weakened the land along Skyrim's northeastern coast in ways that were not immediately visible. The stress placed on the boundary between Mundus and Oblivion during the gate openings may have created geological instabilities that expressed themselves decades later. The Great Collapse, on this reading, is a delayed consequence of the crisis, rather than a college accident. The college does not promote this theory publicly. It would require the residents of Winterhold to redirect their anger from the mages they can see to an event 2 generations past that nobody present was responsible for. The rocks at the edge of the ruined city do not explain themselves. They simply sit there, cold and quiet, at the edge of what used to be a much larger town. The Hall of the Vigilant, the base of operations for the vigilance of Stendarr in Skyrim, is destroyed by vampires before you can visit it if you progress far enough in the Dawnguard questline. But before that destruction, the Vigilance operated from that hall as an organization dedicated to hunting Daedric influence and corruption. The Vigilance were a post-crisis institution. They formed in direct response to the crisis, to the realization that Daedric influence in the mortal world had reached a level that required a dedicated, organized response. Before the crisis, Stendarr's mercy was practiced by individual healers and traveling priests. After the crisis, it became an organized, militant order. The hall's eventual destruction by vampires, another form of Daedric corruption, connected to Molag Bal, is a quiet narrative echo of the crisis itself. The organization born to fight the consequences of Daedric intrusion is destroyed by Daedric intrusion. The crisis ended. The problem it represented did not. There is a quiet irony running through Skyrim's third-era geography. The crisis was fought to preserve the barrier between the mortal world and Oblivion. Post-Septim died to close the gates. The Empire continued, life continued, and 200 years later, in the time of the main game, Daedric shrines sit openly on hillsides across Skyrim. Daedric artifacts are traded and collected. Daedric quests are completed openly. The priests of the Nine do not organize campaigns against them. The Vigilance of Stendarr try, with limited success, to push back. But the broader culture of Skyrim has absorbed Daedric presence as a fact of life. The crisis was catastrophic enough to reshape the Empire's security structure and end a dynasty. But it was not catastrophic enough to change how ordinary people in Skyrim relate to the Daedric princes. The shrines stayed up, the worship continued, the scars went into the ground, and the world built itself back over them without asking too many questions about what was underneath. There is a place that exists outside of time and outside of the mortal world. It has no sun. It has no sky. It has corridors of wet stone and shelves that go on past any reasonable distance, and the sound of pages turning somewhere you cannot locate. Mora built it, or grew it, or simply is it. The difference is hard to explain. The library at the edge of everything has been there since before the first word was written down anywhere in Tamriel, and it will be there after the last word is forgotten. Apocrypha is the name of Mora's realm of Oblivion. It appears in the Dragonborn DLC as a location you visit multiple times, through the Black Books, through the main questline, through Mirak's story. Most Daedric realms in Elder Scrolls lore are described, but rarely seen in detail. Apocrypha is the exception. You walk through it. You navigate its corridors. You interact with the beings that live there. And what the game shows you, assembled slowly across multiple visits, is a realm with a specific and consistent internal logic. It is not random. It is not chaotic. It is a library, the largest one imaginable, and it is organized in its own way, by its own rules, with the same care that any serious archive would be organized. Each Black Book in the Dragonborn DLC transports you to a different part of Apocrypha. The chambers are not identical. Some are flooded with dark water. Some have open areas with towers of shelves rising into an invisible ceiling. Some are narrow and claustrophobic, with passages that seem to double back on themselves. The variety of environments across different Black Book visits is easy to read, as simple game design, different visual settings to keep the locations from feeling repetitive. But the lore implication is more specific. If each Black Book opens into a different chamber of Apocrypha, then Apocrypha is geographically structured. It has distinct regions. Different areas serve different purposes or hold different categories of knowledge. The realm is not a single space, it is a building with rooms, a very large building, organized by a very particular mind, with a specific reason for why each room is where it is. Mora does not keep everything in one place. He organizes. That organizational logic is visible in the architecture if you pay attention across multiple visits. The Seekers are the primary intelligent beings you encounter in Apocrypha. They appear as robed, tentacled figures that move through the library's corridors with obvious purpose. They attack intruders, But their behavior before they notice you is worth observing. They move between shelves. They interact with the books. They carry things from one location to another. They are not guards in the simple sense. They are staff. Mora's library has staff beings whose purpose is to maintain, organize, and protect the collection. The lurkers are different large, powerful creatures that emerge from the flooded areas of Apocrypha. Their role is closer to a physical security system than an organizational one. The distinction between seekers and lurkers reflects two different functions in a well-run archive: the intellectual maintenance staff and the physical protection system. Mora did not simply fill his realm with monsters. He staffed it according to function. The library operates the way a library should operate. It just operates in the dark, in a realm outside of time, maintained by beings that will kill you for touching the wrong shelf. Reading a black book in the mortal world carries a risk that multiple NPCs reference without fully explaining. Characters who know what black books are react with alarm when they see you handling one. Storn Cragstrider, the shaman of the Skull village on Solstheim, is reluctant to read one even when it is necessary to advance the questline. Neloth, the Telvanni mage on Solstheim, has read black books himself and is clearly not entirely intact afterward. He is brilliant and functional, but there is something slightly off in how he relates to other people and to the experience of reality. The risk of reading a black book is not simply the physical danger of being transported to Apocrypha. It is the cognitive and perceptual risk of having your mind exposed to Mora's realm directly. Apocrypha contains knowledge that the mortal mind was not designed to hold comfortably. Accessing it through a black book means your consciousness enters a space where information exists in a form and quantity that can permanently alter how a person perceives the world. Most people who read black books are changed by it. Some are changed in ways they do not notice until later. Neloth is a walking demonstration of what long-term black book use produces a person of exceptional intelligence, operating slightly outside normal parameters for human experience. Miraak is the first Dragonborn. He predates the main game by an enormous margin. He lived during the Merethic era, in the time of the Dragon Cult. He discovered the black books and used them to access Apocrypha directly. He made a pact with Hermaeus Mora and gained knowledge that allowed him to resist the Dragon Cult's authority and establish independent power on Solstheim. Mora sheltered him in Apocrypha when the Dragon Cult moved against him. And there, in the library at the edge of everything, Miraak remained for thousands of years. What that kind of exposure to Apocrypha did to Miraak over that time is something the game shows rather than explains. He is clearly still himself. His personality, his ambitions, his specific resentments are all intact. But he is also something more than human. He has absorbed enough of Apocrypha's character that he operates at a level of knowledge and perception that normal Dragonborn simply do not access. Some fans believe this prolonged exposure gave Miraak a form of partial divinity, not godhood, but something adjacent to it. A mortal who has lived in a Daedric realm for thousands of years, feeding on its knowledge, is no longer quite what he was when he arrived. Mora did not intend to create a semi-divine being. He intended to create a useful servant. The distinction between those two outcomes is part of what makes the final confrontation with Miraak complicated for Mora. The final confrontation with Miraak in Apocrypha ends with Mora killing Miraak, directly absorbing his soul before you can do it yourself. This is a deliberate act by Mora, not an accident or a moment of anger. Miraak had grown beyond what Mora found useful. His ambition to return to the mortal world and dominate it was not compatible with his continued role as Mora's servant. Mora eliminates him with the same practicality that a librarian might use to remove a damaged book from circulation. The soul is absorbed, the threat is neutralized, and Mora turns to you, the new Dragonborn, and offers the same pact he offered Miraak long ago. The framing of this ending reveals something specific about Mora's actual relationship to his mortal agents. He is not loyal to individuals. He is loyal to the function they serve. Mirak served his function for thousands of years and then became a liability. The cycle simply restarts with a new dragonborn. Mora's patience is not kindness. It is the patience of someone who understands that there will always be another mortal willing to trade something for access to what he knows. The reward choices at the end of each Black Book visit ask you to choose between different power upgrades. The specific choices vary between books, but they all offer practical benefits, improved skills, new abilities, useful passive effects. What the choices reveal about Mora is quiet but consistent. He does not ask you what you want to know. He offers you what he has assessed you need. He has watched you. He has catalogued your behavior and your abilities. And he presents options that are relevant to how you actually play. This is Mora, working as designed as a being whose entire existence is organized around the collection and application of knowledge. He knows you better than you might be comfortable with. The reward is not a gift. It is evidence of how thoroughly he has already studied you before the exchange takes place. Every Black Book visit is a transaction. You bring him access to knowledge. He wants your experience, your actions in the mortal world, your dragonborn nature. He gives you something useful in return. The library grows, the collection improves, and Mora, patient and thorough, files the new information in whatever part of Apocrypha was waiting for it. The Black Books themselves are worth considering as objects. They are physical books, readable, holdable, transportable. They exist in the mortal world. They can sit on shelves. They can be moved between locations. They can be found, lost, traded, hidden. For objects that serve as doorways to a Daedric realm, they are remarkably ordinary in their physical form. Mora made them this way deliberately, according to the logic the questline implies. A sealed vault is conspicuous. A book is not. The most dangerous passages to Apocrypha look like reading material. They sit on shelves in Dwemer ruins and Skal villages and the libraries of powerful mages. They wait for someone curious enough to open them. Mora has been distributing these doorways across Tamriel for a very long time, not forcing anyone through, just leaving them where curious people will find them. The library, at the edge of everything, grows one reader at a time. Most of them do not fully understand what they walked into until they are already inside. The Black Books found in the base game of Skyrim before the Dragonborn DLC are mentioned in dialogue and can be found in certain locations. Mora's presence in the main game is a whisper before it becomes a conversation in the DLC. He exists at the edge of the main story, relevant, present, watching, without ever being centered. This is consistent with how Mora operates across all of Elder Scrolls lore. He does not announce himself. He does not build cults or send champions to compete in public arenas. He leaves books in places where interested people will find them. He waits for someone to read far enough that the conversation becomes unavoidable. And then, when the time is right, the page turns, the corridor opens, and the library is right there, vast and wet and patient, exactly where it has always been. The civil war in Skyrim did not begin the morning Ulfric Stormcloak killed High King Torrig. It began much earlier, in the decades after the Great War, in the terms of the White Gold Concordat, in the slow accumulation of decisions that nobody at the ground level of Skyrim's politics was asked to make. By the time the game begins, the war has already been running for years. Most of the people fighting it did not choose it. They simply found themselves inside it. The Fourth Era Civil War is the political surface of Skyrim, the thing most visible, most discussed, most actively playing out while everything else in the game happens around it. But the questline itself, if followed carefully through both Imperial and Stormcloak paths, reveals a layer of history underneath the immediate conflict that changes how both sides read. Neither the Empire nor the Stormcloaks are quite what they present themselves as being. The war they are fighting is real. The reasons behind it go deeper than either side's official story reaches. Ulfric's Stormcloak's capture at Helgen was not the result of random Imperial patrol activity. The timing and location of the ambush catching Ulfric crossing into Skyrim near the Cyrodiil border implied prior intelligence. Someone knew where Ulfric would be, and when. The Imperial Legion did not stumble onto a Stormcloak column by accident in the Geralt mountain passes. General Tullius's presence at the execution, the organized nature of the prisoner transport, the fact that a high-value prisoner like Ulfric was being moved, rather than held all of it, suggests a coordinated operation built on specific information. Where that information came from is something the game leaves open. But the Thalmor dossier on Ulfric found during the diplomatic immunity questline, if you search carefully, fills in one part of the picture. The Aldmeri Dominion had been tracking Ulfric for years. They knew his movements, and the Thalmor had relationships with elements of the Imperial intelligence apparatus. The ambush at Helgen may have been Imperial in execution. The information behind it may have come from somewhere else entirely. The Thalmor dossier on Ulfric is one of the most quietly significant documents in Skyrim. It is easy to miss, found in a locked chest during a party you are infiltrating. But its contents reframe the entire civil war. The dossier describes Ulfric as an asset, not a Thalmor agent, not a willing collaborator, but someone whose actions consistently serve Thalmor interests without his knowledge or consent. The Thalmor want the civil war to continue. A Skyrim consumed by internal conflict cannot effectively resist Dominion influence. A unified Skyrim, under either a strong Imperial presence or a strong Stormcloak government, is a problem for Thalmor long-term strategy. Ulfric's rebellion keeps Skyrim divided. The dossier notes that his capture and execution would be counterproductive. It would end the war and produce exactly the unity the Thalmor want to prevent. The Thalmor did not start the civil war, but they have been carefully maintaining the conditions that keep it going. The two sides, fighting in Skyrim's holds, believe they are making choices about their own future. The dossier suggests someone else has been quietly managing the range of choices available to them. General Tullius believes in the Empire, not the current weakened version, the idea of what the Empire represents. Order, law, the infrastructure of civilization held together across a vast territory by agreed-upon authority. His frustration with Skyrim runs through his dialogue consistently. He does not understand why Nords are willing to tear apart a functional province over a religious question, the worship of Talos, banned under the Concordat, when the practical consequences of imperial rule are demonstrably positive. But the Hold Guard dialogue across Skyrim tells a different story about how ordinary Nords experience imperial authority. Guards in imperial-controlled holds speak about the ban on Talos worship with quiet resentment. They follow imperial law. They do not believe in it. The gap between Tullius's assessment of Nord loyalty and the actual emotional state of the people he is asking to be loyal is not small. He is applying an administrative logic: the Empire works. Therefore support it to a population whose primary objection is not administrative. Tullius is right about the Empire's practical value. He has significantly underestimated how much that practical value matters to people whose gods have been made illegal. The Greybeards attempted to broker peace between the Imperial Legion and the Stormcloaks before the Dragonborn's involvement in the war. The Peace Council at High Hrothgar, which you can participate in during the main questline, is not the first time the Greybeards have tried to bring the two sides to a table. Their earlier attempts, referenced in NPC dialogue, were refused. Both sides had reasons to decline. The Empire was still assessing whether a military solution was achievable. The Stormcloaks were still building their strength in the eastern holds. Neither side was ready to negotiate from a position they considered acceptable. The Greybeards, the most respected religious institution in Skyrim, living at the most sacred location in the province, asked both sides to come and talk. Both sides said no. This detail is easy to pass over, but it establishes something important about how far gone the situation was before the Dragonborn arrived. When institutions powerful enough to command religious reverence from both Nord factions cannot get either side to a table, the conflict has moved past the stage where normal diplomatic channels work. The Imperial questline ending and the Stormcloak questline ending both resolve the immediate military conflict. One side wins, the other retreats or surrenders. The holds that changed hands during the war are now stable under the victorious faction. Life continues. But the aftermath dialogue and the economic state of Skyrim in both endings reveals something that neither side advertised as part of their political platform. Maven Blackbriar becomes Jarl of Riften in the Imperial ending, appointed by Imperial authority. The Thieves Guild's influence over Riften's economy, already substantial, becomes formally entrenched in the city's political structure. The Empire, in appointing Maven, chose economic stability and a cooperative local power over any kind of civic reform. The Stormcloak ending produces a different political landscape, but does not fundamentally change the economic structure of the holds. The people who controlled trade and supply chains before the war control them after it. Political power changed hands. Economic power did not move very much. The war was fought over identity, religion, and sovereignty. The people who won those arguments found that the infrastructure of Skyrim's daily life had been managed throughout the entire conflict by people who were careful to stay useful to whichever side was winning. Ulfric's Stormcloak is a complicated figure in a way that his own rhetoric does not acknowledge. He is a genuine Nord nationalist who believes deeply in Skyrim's independence and in the right of Nords to worship Talos. Those beliefs are real, but Ulfric is also a man who killed a High King in a formal challenge using the Thuum, a power that most Nords cannot access. The legitimacy of that challenge is debated in-game. Torrig was not the same kind of warrior Ulfric was. Using the voice in a political challenge is, depending on your interpretation of Nord tradition, either completely legitimate or deeply unfair. Ulfric does not engage with this question publicly. His cause requires him to be unambiguously right. The Thalmor dossier's description of him as an asset, someone whose sincere beliefs make him useful to a third party he is unaware of, is the part of his story that sits most uncomfortably alongside his genuine passion for Skyrim's freedom. He is not a puppet. He is a man whose real convictions are being used by people who do not share them. The Imperial Legion in Skyrim is fighting a war it did not fully choose either. The Empire's decision to enforce the White Gold Concordat, specifically the ban on Talos worship in Skyrim, was made in Cyrodiil by people calculating the cost of another war with the Aldmeri Dominion. Skyrim's cultural relationship with Talos was not the primary consideration in that calculation. The Legion soldiers stationed in Skyrim are enforcing a policy that many of them personally disagree with, on behalf of a government that made the decision for strategic reasons that the soldiers on the ground were not consulted about. Hadvar, the Imperial soldier who helps you escape Helgen at the start of the game, is a good person, doing a difficult job inside a compromised institution. His loyalty to the Empire is genuine. His understanding of why the Empire is in the position it is incomplete. Most of the people fighting on both sides of the civil war share that incompleteness. They know their side. They do not fully know the forces shaping the field they are fighting on. The war ends. One side wins. Skyrim continues. The Thalmor continue operating from their embassy in the mountains. The economic structures remain largely intact. The religious question Talos worship is resolved differently depending on which ending you get. But even the Stormcloak victory does not produce a clear, permanent resolution to Skyrim's relationship with the Empire and the Dominion. The Civil War solved the immediate military question of who controls the holds. It did not solve the underlying questions that produced it. Those questions about sovereignty, about faith, about what Skyrim owes the Empire, and what the Empire owes Skyrim, are still present at the end of both questline paths, quietly, without a clear answer. the way most real questions about who a place belongs to tend to remain, long after the last battle has been decided and the soldiers have gone home. The Elder Scrolls do not tell you what will happen. They show you what could happen, one thread among many, written in a language that changes meaning depending on who reads it and when. The Dragonborn prophecy was not a clear instruction. It was a shape in the fog, and the main questline of Skyrim is, underneath all its dragon fights and shout unlocks, a story about what happens when a prophecy meets a person who was not fully briefed on what they were supposed to do. The fourth era is the present of Skyrim. The dragons have returned, Alduin has come back, and somewhere in the province, a person who absorbs dragon souls is walking around without knowing what that means or what it will cost. The main questline moves quickly from discovery to training to confrontation, but the lore underneath that movement, the buried contradictions, the unanswered questions, the things that the scrolls apparently did not think worth mentioning, rewards slower attention. The prophecy pointed at a dragonborn. It did not explain everything the dragonborn was actually doing when they fulfilled it. Paarthurnax sits at the very top of the throat of the world. He has been there for thousands of years. He is old even by dragon standards, one of Alduin's original lieutenants, who chose a different path, who learned to meditate on the way of the voice instead of dominating mortals. When he tells you about the ancient battle at the throat of the world, the moment when Hakon One-Eye, Gormlaith Golden Hilt, and Feldir the Old used an Elder Scroll to cast Alduin forward through time, his account is specific and personal. He was there. He watched it happen from the other side. But his account differs quietly from the version preserved in imperial historical records. The imperial texts describe the battle as a decisive defeat of Alduin, a victory of mortal heroes over a divine enemy. Paarthurnax describes it differently. He describes a desperate measure taken by people who could not achieve a clean victory. Casting Alduin forward through time was not winning, it was postponing. The heroes at the throat of the world did not defeat Alduin, they moved him. The imperial version of history needed a victory story. What actually happened was more complicated and less final than any official record chose to preserve. The Greybeards knew about you before you arrived at High Hrothgar. This is easy to miss inside the main questline, because the game presents their summons, the Horn of Jurgen Windcaller quest, the Thuum shout that calls you to the mountain, as a response to your dragonborn nature becoming apparent at the Western Watchtower outside Whiterun, and that summons is genuine. But several details in the questline suggest the Greybeards had been aware of a dragonborn in Skyrim for longer than their response implies. Arngir's dialogue, when pressed on certain questions, contains careful phrasings that suggest knowledge held back rather than knowledge absent. The Greybeards' vow of silence, their choice to speak as little as possible, because their voices carry the power of the voice, means that most of what they know is never stated directly. They communicate in fragments. What they choose not to say is as significant as what they say. The overlooked reading of their behavior in the questline is that they were watching and waiting for some time before Helgen, and that their formal summons after the Western Watchtower was not the beginning of their awareness. It was the moment they decided to make that awareness official. Alduin speaks during the final battle in Sovngarde. His dialogue is worth reading carefully because it reveals something about how he understands his own role that differs from how mortals describe him. He is not simply angry. He is not simply trying to survive. He speaks about the world-eating cycle as something he believes in, as a cosmic function that he is meant to perform. From Alduin's perspective, devouring the world at the end of each age is not destruction for its own sake. It is a role, a position he was given at the beginning of creation. He was made to eat the world when the time came. The problem, from his perspective, is that mortals and the actions of certain other dragons, specifically Paarthurnax, interfered with that cycle. He was cast forward through time. He returned to a world that had moved on without him. His resurrection of other dragons reads, in his own framing, as an attempt to re-establish the conditions for performing his actual function. He is not a villain in the way that simple quest summaries make him sound. He is a being who was built for one purpose and has been denied the ability to perform it, who is now attempting to reclaim that purpose with the tools available to him. That does not make him someone you want to succeed, but it makes him something more interesting than a standard enemy. The Dragonborn's power, the ability to absorb dragon souls after killing a dragon, is presented as the defining characteristic of the Dragonborn identity. It is what separates you from any other skilled warrior. You absorb the soul. You gain the knowledge of a word of power. The dragon is gone. That is the functional description. But the lore implication of where those souls go after absorption is something the questline raises without fully answering. Dragon souls, in Elder Scrolls lore, are not like human souls. They carry a different kind of consciousness, ancient, powerful, shaped by thousands of years of existence. When a Dragonborn absorbs a dragon soul, that soul does not go to the soul cairn. It does not go to Sovngarde. It does not disperse. It goes into the Dragonborn. It stays there. The Dragonborn, who has absorbed many dragon souls, is carrying a significant accumulation of ancient, powerful consciousness inside them. What that means in the long term, whether those souls retain any coherence, whether they influence the Dragonborn's own consciousness over time, whether they can ever be released, is never addressed in the questline. The game lets you absorb dozens of dragon souls without raising the question. But the lore, sitting quietly underneath the mechanic, suggests that the Dragonborn is not simply gaining power. They are becoming a container for something that has nowhere else to go. The Elder Scroll used at the throat of the world, the one Feldir used to cast Alduin forward through time, appears in the main questline as an object you need to find and read. The process of finding it takes you to the College of Winterhold, to Septimus Cygnus's outpost, and eventually to Blackreach and the Tower of Mzark. The scroll is held inside a Dwemer mechanism. The Dwemer, according to multiple in-game sources, had significant interest in the Elder Scrolls and in the nature of fate and time. The fact that a Dwemer mechanism was built specifically to hold and allow safe reading of an Elder Scroll is a detail the questline does not stop to explain. Why did the Dwemer build a machine for this? What did they know about this particular scroll? The Tower of Mzark's orrery, which you use to extract the scroll, was designed to interact with it. That implies the Dwemer knew the scroll would be there and built the retrieval system deliberately. What they planned to do with it, or what they were preventing anyone else from doing with it, is a question the questline moves past without answering. Sovngarde is the Nordic afterlife. You reach it by travelling through the portal at Skuldafn and walking across the misty fields toward the Hall of Valor. The souls of great Nord heroes are there, including Hakon One-Eye, Gormlaith Golden Hilt, and Feldir the Old, who help you fight Alduin in the final battle. But the specific population of Sovngarde raises a quiet question. Only Nords go there, not all Nords, specifically those who died in battle or lived with honour, as the Nord tradition defines it. The other races of Tamriel Imperials, Dunmer, Altmer, Argonians, Khajiit, do not have Sovngarde waiting for them. They have different afterlife destinations depending on their beliefs, their race, and which divine or Daedric forces have claims on their souls. The questline takes you through Sovngarde without addressing any of this. It is the Nord afterlife, and your character passes through it, regardless of their racial background. But the lore around what Sovngarde is, and who qualifies for it, and what happens to everyone who does not, is a reminder that Tamriel's afterlife is not a single place. It is a collection of different destinations, each one organized around a different cultural or divine claim on the souls of the dead. Parthenax's offer to help mortals learn the way of the voice is the philosophical core of his character, but there is a buried tension in his position that the questline does not fully resolve. Paarthurnax chose to oppose Alduin and help mortals because he believed that the dominion instinct in dragons, the drive to dominate, to rule, to consume, was something that could be overcome through meditation and discipline. He has been practicing that belief for thousands of years. He has achieved something genuine. But the Blades' argument that Paarthurnax was one of Alduin's chief lieutenants, that he committed real atrocities before his change of heart, that his current peaceable behavior does not erase his history, is not wrong either. The questline presents both positions and leaves the choice to you. What it does not address is whether Paarthurnax's version of himself, the reformed dragon, the patient teacher, is what he actually is, or a very long-term project he is still in the middle of. Thousands of years of meditation is a genuine commitment. It is also a very long time to be running from something you used to be. The word walls in Skyrim record the history of the dragons and their interactions with mortals. They are carved in Dovazul, the dragon language. When your character learns words of power from them, the process is described as absorbing the word directly into your understanding. The word becomes part of you. You do not study it. You do not practice it until it makes sense. You touch the wall and you know. This mechanic is explained as a dragonborn gift, the ability to absorb language the way dragons absorb souls. But the implication runs deeper than a gameplay convenience. The dragonborn does not just learn the word. They receive the full understanding that the word carries the dragon's way of knowing, the conceptual weight of what the word means at the level of creation. Every word of power absorbed is another piece of dragon cognition added to a mortal mind. The questline treats this as a power-up system. The lore treats it as a fundamental transformation of how a person relates to language and reality. By the end of the main quest, the Dragonborn has absorbed an unusual amount of dragon knowing into a mortal frame. What that frame does with all of it after the dragons are dealt with is a question the game does not need to answer to tell its story, but the question is there. The main questline ends with Alduin defeated in Sovngarde. The dragon souls you have absorbed are still inside you. Paarthurnax is still on the mountain, meditating. The Greybeards are still at High Hrothgar. The Elder Scroll is wherever you left it. The prophecy, as the game frames it, is fulfilled. But the Elder Scrolls themselves, the actual objects, the impossible documents that exist outside of time and show readers their own blindness, do not record endings. They record moments. The moment you read the scroll at the throat of the world was one moment in a document that contains all moments simultaneously. The prophecy that pointed at a dragonborn did not describe a resolution. It described a convergence, a point where certain forces and certain people and certain choices would meet. That convergence happened. What it means beyond the immediate story, what the dragonborn carrying all those absorbed souls means, what Alduin's temporary defeat inside the cycle of ages means, what the world does next with a dragonborn who is still walking around in it, the scrolls did not record. Or if they did, no one has read far enough to find out. The throat of the world is quiet now. The wind moves across the stone the same way it has moved across it since before the first shouted word was ever spoken. Paarthurnax meditates. The ancient inscription on the peak still reads in Dovazul, a language that was old before Tamriel had its current shape. Below the mountain, the holds go on with their politics and their weather and their ordinary concerns. The prophecy moved through the world like a slow wave and spent itself on the shore of Sovngarde. What washed back was a person standing in a world that had stopped asking the question it had been building toward for a very long time. The scrolls roll forward, time keeps turning, and somewhere inside the Dragonborn, in the quiet space between one heartbeat and the next, something ancient and enormous is still, in its own diminished way, present. Every quest has a completion marker, a small check in a menu, a line of text that says the task is done. But Skyrim keeps running after that check appears. The fires keep burning. The rivers keep moving. The guards keep walking their routes in the cold. And somewhere out there, in a world that does not stop for anyone, ordinary people are going about ordinary lives that no quest marker will ever point you toward. This is the last chapter. Let it settle slowly. The Fourth Era presses on. The dragons came back. The civil war ran its course. The Dragonborn walked through all of it and came out the other side. And now the world continues, not as a concluded story, but as a place that simply keeps existing the way places do, without needing a reason or a resolution. Skyrim was old before the Dragonborn arrived. It will be old after. The holds will stand, the snow will fall, the mead halls will stay warm on cold nights, and the people inside them will keep having the same conversations they were having before any of this started, because that is what people do. They continue, quietly, without fanfare, one ordinary day after another. Radiant quests in Skyrim are quests that never end. They reset, they regenerate. A companion asks you to clear a bandit camp. You clear it. Weeks pass in the game world. The bandits return. The quest becomes available again. A thieves' guild contact needs something stolen. You steal it. The same contact will need something else next week. The Jarls send you to kill creatures that will respawn in the same locations indefinitely. This is easy to read as a game design limitation. The developers needed content to fill the open world after the main stories concluded. But there is a quieter reading available. The Radiant Quest system reflects something true about how the world actually works. Problems do not stay solved. Bandit camps do not stay cleared. Roads do not stay safe. The work of maintaining a livable world is not a series of missions with completion states. It is an ongoing, repeating effort that does not conclude as long as the world is still running. The companions have been clearing the same roads and the same caves for generations before the Dragonborn arrived. They will keep clearing them after. The quests that never end are not a flaw in the game's design. They are the most honest thing the game does. The innkeepers of Skyrim know things. This is a game mechanic. They give you rumors and quest leads when you ask. But their dialogue, listened to over many hours of play, reveals something beyond their function as information dispensers. The Villamere Inn in Ivarstead sits at the base of the 7,000 steps that lead to High Hrothgar. The innkeeper there, Wilhelm, has watched pilgrims climb those steps his entire life. He knows which seasons bring the most travelers. He knows which pilgrims come back down, looking changed, and which ones never come back down at all. He has opinions about the Greybeards that no quest ever asks him to share at length. Hulda, at the Bannered Mare in Whiterun, has watched the political situation in the hold shift and settle and shift again while she refills the same mugs for the same regulars. Kust at Frostfruit Inn in Rorikstead serves travellers passing through a small farming village and knows everything about the quiet rhythms of agricultural life in a hold that most players pass through without stopping. These people are not waiting for the Dragonborn to give their lives meaning. They already have lives, full ones. The quests running through their towns are interruptions in those lives, not the point of them. Hermaeus Mora's final words to the player in the Dragonborn DLC carry a quiet weight that sits differently after the questline ends. Mora got what he wanted from the exchange. The Dragonborn gained power. The transaction concluded. But Mora's parting tone measured, patient, already looking past the current moment toward the next acquisition, implies something about the nature of the relationship that the questline never directly states. Knowledge without rest is its own kind of trap. Mora exists in a state of permanent, total engagement with information. Every secret, every hidden thing, every forgotten piece of history across all of Tamriel, he is aware of all of it, always, simultaneously. That is not described in the game as a burden. It is presented as power. But the beings in Apocrypha, the seekers moving endlessly through the corridors, the souls wandering the reading rooms, Mirak himself, trapped in a state of perpetual semi-existence in the library, are not at rest. They are engaged, permanently. with more information than any consciousness was built to comfortably hold. Mora offered the Dragonborn access to that state in a limited, bounded form. The Dragonborn took what was useful and left. That departure, the ability to take the knowledge and walk back out into the ordinary world, is something Mora himself cannot do. He is always inside the library. The Dragonborn got to go home. That difference is small and enormous at the same time. The music of Skyrim shifts after the main quest ends. This is a detail that many players feel without consciously identifying. The ambient score, the quiet tracks that play while you walk through holds, climb mountains, move through forests, at dusk has a slightly different quality after Alduin is defeated. The tracks that carried a low, persistent tension during the main quest resolve into something more open. The music that plays in Skyrim's wilderness, in the post-main quest world, feels less like a score that is building towards something, and more like a score that has arrived somewhere and is simply describing what is here. Jeremy Soule, who composed Skyrim's music, built the score around thematic development motifs that grow, resolve, and return. After the main quest, certain motifs that appeared in their developmental form throughout the game appear in their resolved forms. The world exhales. The music exhales with it. Most players do not consciously notice this, but they feel it. The holds feel quieter after the main quest. The wilderness feels more at rest. The score is telling the truth about where the story is, even when the story has officially stopped being told. The guards of Skyrim are often the subject of jokes. They comment on your appearance. They reference the arrow in the knee. They cycle through dialogue that repeats across hundreds of hours of gameplay. But the guards are also the most consistent feature of Skyrim's world. In every hold, in every weather condition, at every hour of the day and night, the guards are walking their routes. Cold mornings in Windhelm, rainy evenings outside Riften's gates, the quiet midnight watch on the walls of Solitude while the city sleeps below. The guards did not stop walking their routes during the Oblivion crisis. They did not stop during the Civil War. They kept walking during the dragon attacks, taking up positions and fighting creatures they were not trained to face, and then returning to their routes when it was over. The guard, walking the walls of Whiterun at 3 a.m, is doing something genuinely important, not heroic, not dramatic, just important. The wall needs someone on it. The route needs someone walking it. Civilization, at its most basic level, is the agreement to keep doing the quiet, necessary things, even when no one is watching and nothing exciting is happening. The guards of Skyrim keep that agreement every single night. The rivers of Skyrim do not stop for anything. The White River runs from its source in the mountains east of Whiterun, down through the plains and past Riverwood, and out toward the coast. It was running before the first settlement was built on its banks. It ran during the Dragon War. It ran during the Oblivion crisis. It is running right now, in the Fourth Era, while the Dragonborn sleeps in whatever house they have purchased, in whatever hold they chose to call home. The Karth River cuts through the reach past Markarth, indifferent to the politics of the Silverblood family and the pain of the Forsworn. The Ysgramor River runs near Windhelm, cold and grey, past a city that has seen more history than most places in Tamriel. Rivers are the oldest thing in any landscape. They predate everything built beside them. They will be running after everything built beside them has crumbled. The quests that ran along their banks, the battles and the betrayals and the discoveries, were moments the rivers moved past without slowing down. The water that flows through Skyrim today has no memory of any of it. It just keeps moving, the way water does, toward the sea it will always eventually reach. The children of Skyrim will grow up. This is not something the game shows you. The children in Skyrim do not age, the way nothing in the game world permanently changes without player action. But the lore implies it. Lucia begging near the Whiterun marketplace, Aventus Aretino performing the Black Sacrament alone in a cold house in Windhelm, the children in the Honor Hall orphanage in Riften. These are children living inside a world that is currently experiencing a dragon crisis, a civil war, the return of an ancient evil, and the presence of a dragonborn moving through all of it. They will grow up in whatever Skyrim remains after all of that concludes. They will become the guards walking the walls, and the innkeepers refilling the mugs, and the merchants selling the same goods at the same stalls. They will tell their own children about the time the dragons came back. The story will soften with retelling. The details will blur. Alduin will become something larger and simpler in the memory of people who only knew him as the reason the sky was dangerous for a while. The Dragonborn will become a figure from a story, and those children's children will grow up in a world where all of this is history, quiet, distant, softened by time, into the kind of thing you read about in a book on a shelf in the College of Winterhold. The folk beliefs of Skyrim's ordinary people are layered through the game in small places. A farmer who leaves an offering at a roadside shrine before the harvest. An innkeeper who mentions that the road to the east has been bad luck since someone disturbed an old barrow. A fisherman in Dawnstar who will not go out on certain dates because his father told him the ice spirits are restless then. These beliefs are not part of any quest. They are not rewarded with experience points or gold. They are just there in the ambient dialogue, in the small details of how people arrange their homes and their routines. They represent the layer of Skyrim's culture that exists entirely outside the systems the game is built around. No one asked the farmer to leave that offering. No quest marker points to the shrine. He does it because his mother did it, and her mother did it, and somewhere in the long chain of ordinary people doing ordinary things, the belief became part of how that family experiences the world. Skyrim is full of these unrecorded practices. They are the actual texture of life in the province. Everything else, the wars, the prophecies, the Dragonborn, moves through that texture without replacing it. There is a theory among some players that Skyrim's world is lonelier without the Dragonborn active in it. Not dramatic, not tragic, just quieter. The theory goes like this. While the Dragonborn is present and moving through the world, certain possibilities are open. Quests that would otherwise sit unresolved get resolved. People who would otherwise be in trouble get helped. The world bends slightly toward the presence of someone who is willing to do the hard things. When the Dragonborn stops, when the player puts down the game, when the last quest is finished and the controller is set aside, the world continues. But without that presence moving through it, the bandits stay in their camps a little longer before someone clears them. The orphan waits a little longer before someone notices. The old man with the problem no one else will solve keeps having the problem. The world does not collapse. It just runs at its ordinary pace, the way it ran before the Dragonborn arrived, patient and indifferent, and full of small, unresolved difficulties that someone, eventually, might get around to addressing. The Dragonborn was never the only thing keeping Skyrim together. They were just one person, moving through it for a while, doing what they could. The last fire in the last mead hall will go out eventually, long after the fourth era ends and the fifth begins, and whatever comes after that has its own stories and its own heroes and its own forgotten histories. The holds will change, the names on the maps will change, the languages may change, the rivers will stay, the mountains will stay, the cold will stay, and somewhere in the long turning of Tamriel through its ages, the things that happened in Skyrim will become the kind of story that a calm voice tells quietly beside a fire to someone who is almost asleep, who loves this world, who wants to go a little deeper into it before the night takes them. The quests do not really end. The world does not really close. It just gets quieter and quieter and quieter still, until the only sound left is the wind moving across old stone and the fire burning low, and the slow, patient breathing of someone who has finally, gently let it all go.